passport. Be sure to get it stamped with 5 or more stamps by visiting the booth and asking a question. And then you can submit your passport to be entered into win some exciting prizes. And if you haven't already started visiting your booths, you're going to have plenty of time to do so. Your passport must be turned in to the LFA Programs and Services booth by 5 p.m. today, and the raffle winners will be selected at the reception this evening. Now, I'd like to take a moment to introduce some special people who are here with us today. I'm pleased to welcome several of our board members, including Joe Arnold, Judy Barlin, Dr. Karen Kostenvader, Conrad Gehrman, Cherie Perrone, and Barbara Polk. And also a warm welcome to our Chief Advisor for Clinical Development, Dr. Joan Merrill. You're going to hear from Joan just in a little bit. We're so grateful to these individuals for their leadership, their support, and their advocacy. I also want to thank our advocacy and government relations team here at the Lupus Foundation of America for leading the effort to put on this program today. I know that you've been receiving emails and you've been talking to them. So thank you to Pat Wildman, Sarah Chang, and Amina Habib. Again, if you haven't met them, I know you will. And our full team from the Lupus Foundation of America is here with us today, as well as chapter representatives. I'm going to ask them to please stand so that you know who they are. So LFA staff, can you please stand? Please reach out to them throughout the program and share with them ask them questions, share with them your feedback, your input. Your input is what drives our programs and our services, so we want to hear from you. Please, next, I would ask you to please join me in thanking our sponsors. This event is just so important, and we really couldn't put it on without our sponsors. So please join me in thanking the following 6 sponsors: Pharma, AstraZeneca, Aurinia Pharmaceuticals, Biogen, Bristol Myers Squibb, Cabaletta Bio, and Genentech. Again, thank you so much for your generous support. In closing, I want to say a heartfelt thank you to all of you. I know being here is a big investment. It's an investment of including your time and your energy, and it truly means so much to us. Together, we're going to make a positive impact, a lasting impact for the lupus community while we're on Capitol Hill. I want to thank you for your dedication and your passion. So next, I want to introduce you to Pat Wildman, who will share more about today's agenda and plans for the Hill Day. I'm looking forward, again, to meeting all of you if I haven't met you already. We're going to have a great day today, a great day of programming and networking and impactful visits to Capitol Hill. Again, thank you for being here, for sharing your voice, sharing your experiences. So now, please join me in welcoming Pat Wildman.
How's everyone doing today? Excellent. We have a great crowd, obviously, in the room. I want to get a couple shout-outs. Olga, where's Olga? Olga in the room yet? Olga, there we go. Tony in the room. Tony? Where's Tony? There we go. Octavia, where are those shoes? Let's see those sneakers. Awesome. Dr. Kostenvader, you ready? Yeah? Very good. So it's awesome to see all of you here today. As Mary mentioned, we have a great group of advocates who've come from across the country and from around the world. It's simply amazing to see this sea of purple. Thank you for making the trip to DC. Thank you for all that you do and all of your advocacy throughout the year. And I say this every year at the summit. What you do makes a difference. Since we were here last year, we've generated more than $140 million in funding for lupus research and education programs. In the past 10 years, that's over $1 billion. That's $1 billion with a B. That's a lot of money. And it's all thanks to your work on Capitol Hill. So give yourselves another round of applause for that. It's awesome. So these programs are helping to us unlock the mysteries of lupus and to discover new ways to treat and manage the disease and improve quality of life. That's the ultimate goal, is really to improve quality of life. We'll hear more about that in the sessions this afternoon, especially as leaders from the NIH, from the lupus programs at the Department of Defense, at the Office of Minority Health. They're going to be here to share more about what they're doing in lupus and really what they're doing that is made possible through your advocacy. Your advocacy helped generate the funding for their work. We're also going to hear from Dr. Joan Merrill. Thank you, Joan, for being here. And also our partners in the pharmaceutical industry, who work each day to develop new treatments for this disease. And your advocacy makes a difference here as well. You know, that's because lupus research and drug development do not take place without all of you. And you're going to hear more about that. And I think our members or advocates who participate in the Lupus Research Action Network, where are you guys? Let me see you. Lupus Research Action Network. There we go. Right. So they had a session yesterday about clinical trials and the importance of participating in trials. And without their voice, without all of your voices, that doesn't make, progress is not possible. We can't develop new treatments without everyone's voice and their participation. And the voice of people living with lupus matters more now than it has ever mattered before. Your experiences living with the disease, your needs, your preferences, when it comes to treatment, when it comes to care, matter. It makes a difference, and it makes progress possible. But while there's a great progress, or great promise and great progress, and we'll hear a lot more about that today, none of it matters if we can't access the latest treatments that are available. And your advocacy helps break down some of the barriers to access to care. They make care more affordable so that the latest advancements are available to everyone living with lupus. Your advocacy on issues ranging from Medicare and Medicaid to social determinants of health and health equity make a difference. Again, your advocacy matters. What you do tomorrow, what you do today, what you do the rest of the year in engaging your members of Congress, all of that matters. All of it makes a difference. And as Mary mentioned, and I saw the show of hands, we have a ton of new faces here. That's awesome. Awesome to see the new faces. Awesome to see some very familiar ones as well. The sessions that we have this afternoon are going to cater to both audiences. We have our Advocacy 101 session, which will follow shortly after lunch. And we'll really talk about kind of all the details that you need to know about Capitol Hill. And we'll get into that. And then later in the afternoon, we'll talk about advocacy year-round. What you can do for the other 364 days of the year when you're not in D.C. So some really good sessions coming this afternoon. And then, of course, we're going to talk about our Hill Day and what we're going to be asking for in Capitol Hill. And when it comes to that, when we get to that session, you'll hear this theme resonate throughout the program today. What matters most is you. In the meetings on Capitol Hill, what matters most is you, not the talking points, not all the material we're going to give you. It's you. Your story, your experiences, that's what makes a difference. That's what matters. And we're going to help you shape your message when you go to the Hill. So I'm really looking forward to a great day today. A lot more to come, but a few housekeeping things I wanted to go over. First, the Advocacy Day app. If you haven't downloaded it already, please make sure you do so. That has your Hill visits, so your schedule. It has talking points. It has ways to connect with each other, which is really important. And if you have any challenges with the app, please see Sarah or Amina. Can you guys raise your hands? Our great staff in the Advocacy Department who have helped make this event possible. So definitely see Sarah or Amina if you have any questions with the app. Do not see me because I have no idea how to use the app. I am technology challenged. Social media, speaking of technology. Please engage with our social media channels and use the hashtags Lupus Advocacy and Rising Voices. Really help echo our message on Capitol Hill. Get it out there in social media. Table assignments. I think as you've already noticed, you're seated at a table with other advocates from your state or neighboring states. Definitely get to know each other throughout the day if you don't know each other already. You're going to be going to Hill meetings tomorrow. And we're going to be meeting later this afternoon to talk about those meetings and strategize as groups so you can prepare for those visits with members of Congress tomorrow. And then also the exhibits. And Mary mentioned this already, but I want to mention it again. Please do visit our exhibitors. And please make sure when you get your passport stamped and handed in by 5 o'clock this afternoon. Make sure you write your name on it. Don't forget writing your name, because if you don't put your name, you won't be eligible for one of the 3 prizes that are being awarded this year. There'll be 6 total, but the prizes that we have this year are wireless earbuds, heated blanket, as well as electric hand warmers. So don't forget to turn in your passport and get it stamped first this afternoon. Safety, we have masks at registration if you need them, hand sanitizers everywhere throughout the hotel. There's a safety card in your Summit bag. I think there's at your table as well. If anything happens during the day, if you need assistance, you're not feeling well, please see one of our staff. All of us have a staff ribbon at the bottom. It says staff. Just flag us down. We'll help in any way we can. And don't hesitate to take a break. It's a long day. If you're feeling tired, just take a break. You can leave the session, rest out in the foyer there, head up back to your room. Take a break. Take a break. And then two more things before we get to our first session. First is the elevators. I do this every year that we've been here. Just a reminder, there are smart elevators. Do not just walk into the first door that opens, because you're going to go to someone else's floor. You might go up to the 14th floor when you're trying to go to the 3rd. So make sure you press the button for your floor and watch to see what letter appears and go to that elevator. So I need to do that because every year someone's traveled on the elevators for about an hour trying to figure out how to get to their room. And then finally, there will be plenty of opportunity to ask questions. We will have mic runners in the room between sessions or during the sessions. If you have a question, just raise your hand, and our staff will bring a mic over to you. One thing, just in the interest of time, when you do have a question, please say your name and where you're from. That would be great, and that way our speakers can really help address that and know who you are. And with that, I want to get to our first session. So we have a great first session planned, and that is going to be led by Dr. Merrill. Thank you again, Joan, for being here. And this is the promise of lupus treatment development, and Dr. Merrill will moderate the session. And joining Dr. Merrill on stage is going to be Dr. Edgar Charles, the VP of Immunology and R&D at Bristol Myers Squibb, Dr. Raj Tumala from VP of Clinical Development at Cabaletta Bio, as well as Carlos Valdez with Genentech, Dr. Gary Gilkison from the Medical University of South Carolina, and I have in my remarks soon to be Dr. Adobe Ukachukwu. Now, Adobe actually will receive her medical degree on Wednesday, her piece of paper. And she is a lupus warrior and also a member of our Lupus Research Action Network. So Adobe, congrats, and first panel to the stage. Thank you, everyone.
She went the other way. So this is our biotech forum, but we are going to start off by telling you that we have a problem in biotech, trying to develop new drugs for lupus. And the problem is that we have a whole lot of new drugs in development right now. Why is that a problem? We don't have patients to test these drugs. And we're having a terrible time recruiting qualified lupus patients. How do you qualify? Good question, because we think maybe we're designing our trials wrong. And so many people say, I came and I screened for a trial and they wouldn't take me. And then I talked to them a little bit and I realized this is a real patient with real lupus. What are we doing wrong? And so you will notice there is a barcode over there. If you would be so kind as to raise your cell phone, take that barcode, click, you will get to a questionnaire. And in that questionnaire, and by the way, you don't have to have lupus to do it, because you're just going to identify who you are. Do you have lupus or not? It's not your name or anything, it's anonymous, but do you have lupus or not? And if you don't, we want to hear from you too, because we need ideas. And so we're giving you a lot of ideas on this questionnaire, but there's a whole lot more to talk about that maybe we didn't come up with. So we really want to be hearing from you from now into the future, because we've got to solve this problem together. For example, you know, older white women are very wonderful people, if I say so myself. But we are not the majority of lupus patients. And so it really isn't great that most of the people participating in clinical trials for lupus are older white women. And so cannot stress enough the need for diversity in testing new drugs for lupus. Now, it's not always right for an individual person to say, I'm going to be in a trial. And so the whole concept is, if you get the word out far enough, you'll find the people for whom it is right, and not be coercing the people for whom it is not right. And in line with that, we have this wonderful group of people called the Lupus Research Action Network, which Pat referred to before, LRAN. And these are basically volunteer people who they just have in them, they want to be a leader, and they are leaders. And so yesterday we had one of our LRAN meetings, and it was just an amazing day. So, you know, more of you should come on in. We had fun, but we also really had a pretty deep experience. We heard, you know, from some people who've been working in this area for some time, including Dr. Ramsey Goldman, Dr. Williams, and Hatlina Johnson, who have done a lot of work in trying to help people get just aware of research. And so I met just all kinds of people. I met a lawyer. I met a person who's been working for a long time in education and is now going to social work school. I met a teacher who teaches doctors how to be human, challenging work. And I met somebody who in 2024 is still having trouble getting a diagnosis. So it's still going on, guys. And I was very arrogant because, you know, this lady told me a lot about herself. I'm not going to say names of anybody because this is getting personal here, but she told me a lot about herself. And I said, you have lupus. I'm so arrogant, right? Then she told me more about herself. And I said, oh, I don't know. Maybe you are going to this other specialist is a good idea. Now, I'm not saying she doesn't have lupus. When you meet the criteria, you meet the criteria. But her main problem may be something a little bit different that needs a kind of a different approach. And so what this teaches me is that I'm arrogant. That's the first thing. But the second thing that it teaches me is something I kind of already knew. We need more research. We need to understand these illnesses better. And this lady is just complicated. So what do all of these people have in common that I just told you about? Is that they are willing to put themselves out there, as all of you who are willing to go to Congress and knock on those doors are. And so I just think, you know, you should just be very proud. But at this point, I would like to ask the LRAN members to stand up. Pat Wildman would like you to. I would like you to. The LFA would like you to. Because they're just going that extra distance. But now let's give yourselves a round of applause also, because you're going to the Hill. So what did I learn yesterday? Well, first of all, I heard from other people besides my own loud mouth that the lack of diversity in lupus participation and input into clinical trials, hearing the patients' voices into how we do these clinical trials, is hurting research really badly. This is really important. We also heard from LRAN members something that might have been on my radar once in a while, but really they're bringing home that this is incredibly important. we're not reaching out to rural communities. So here we need patients for trials. Here are all these patients who aren't getting probably even good standard of care. Can't we somehow solve these problems together? Can't we have the kind of outreach that provides all of these people what they need and then also finds us more people who might be right to participate in a trial? So, we had a lot of discussion about that, and I thought that was, very, very insightful on the part of several of our LMRAN members who brought it up. And then Helen Johnson gave an incredible workshop, I guess you could call it, on how you go up to a stranger, initiate a conversation, and get around to talking about research. How do you get there? And her solution is very simple. It's the same one that Pat Wildman just said. You bring yourself. You bring your own self, you open up, and you share who you are. And when you do that, you can talk to anybody about anything. I just had a good day, and I wanted to share that with you. But all of this culminates in an initiative of the LFA called RAY, Research Accelerated by You. And this is also an online thing. So when people are not ready to actually participate in a clinical trial, they can still add a lot of value to research by participating in this. Online, you don't have to put identifiers in there. They don't have to know who you are. But it's an online, it goes on and on and on because you can keep coming back and filling it out again as things change. Learning about lupus patients from everywhere. And this information is important to pharmaceutical companies who are developing trials and developing drugs. And it's important to the FDA to understand who's out there and what the unmet needs are. So without having to take a test drug, everyone could participate in that kind of research. So Research Accelerated by You, you're going to find it on the LFA website. That is my update about the LFA's contribution to biotech. And now, for the good part of the program, we're going to talk about biotech's contribution to us. And we're going to start with Dr. Raj Tamulla from Cabaletta.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's my absolute honor to be here. Let me just figure out the slides. That's where I do it.
How do we make the slides go?
Oh, okay, there you go. Well, like I said, it's my absolute honor to be here. I've spent the majority of my career in lupus drug development. I was on the team that developed and eventually got approved Safnella or anifrolumab, which was a very long journey. So to be able to bring to you the second drug in the last 60 years for lupus was an absolute privilege. But when you look at the successful studies and you look at the response rates, I think it's about, 50% at best. So 50% of the patients are not getting better. And that's on top of standard of care. They're getting steroids, they're getting immunosuppressants, which have their own safety burden, as we all know. And then when you look at higher thresholds, such as remission and low disease activity states, it's low digits. It's 10, 20% at best. So I think we can do better, and the science is evolving, which is one of the reasons, if I can get this to move. Okay, there you go, which is why I joined Cabaletta Bio about a month ago. Where we are looking at developing and launching the first curative cellular therapies for patients with autoimmune diseases and lupus. Is it? Okay. So as we know, lupus is a very complex disease. There's multiple pathways in play, but one pathway that we know is the role of the B cells. The B cells produce autoantibodies, and these autoantibodies, target the various organs, which is why we have inflammation and end organ damage. And as you can see from these pictures, the B cells interact with other cells in the immune system, the T cells, the dendritic cells, etc. And you can see the various connections. Sorry, this is very sensitive. I'll go back. I think I figured it out. Sorry. Trying to get to my right. Yeah. This one? Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, much better. Now, all of the B cells, so the B cells produce these autoantibodies, and some are good, some are bad, and they do a lot of damage in the body. Now, the B cells can be identified by various markers or receptors, and that's what helps them interact with the other cells. Now, one marker or receptor that all B cells have is a marker called CD19, and we'll come to that. So as I said, B cells have a very critical role in lupus. Now, the concept of targeting B cells is not totally new. You know, there's peripheral depletion with antibody agents like rituximab, and those results have been somewhat mixed. Then there's also the target of targeting BLyS so that they won't mature and proliferate with Benlysta. So it's not totally new. But what if we were to deplete all of the B cells, a deep depletion, sort of reset the immune system? So now you have a fresh group of naive B cells that are no longer pathological. And so that's what CAR T therapy aims to do. So let me explain to you what we do. So CAR T therapy stands for chimeric antigen receptor. So as I said, those B cells, they all have this one marker called CD19. So what we do is we take your blood, if you start from the bottom on 1, we take the patient's blood, white blood cells, including T cells. These T cells are then re-engineered, genetically modified, to have a chimeric antigen receptor that now those T cells now will recognize those B cells with the CD19 marker. And then we expand those T cells outside in a lab with media, et cetera. And then after expanding the T cells, these genetically modified T cells, we infuse them back into the body. So as you can see, this concept of targeting B cells with genetically modified T cells is not totally new. It's been actually done in oncology, especially in B-cell leukemias and B-cell lymphomas. And as you can see on the bottom, you see a CAR T cell. There's a leukemia cell, binds to the CD19. It depletes or destroys the B cell, and there the patient, obviously, in this case, their leukemia or lymphoma is gone. You see very high remission rates. These are very durable remission rates in oncology. There's 4 agents approved, and now all 4 agents are autologous, which means they're taking cells from your own body and modifying them. So now the same thing has been applied, so why not apply that to lupus and autoimmune diseases? The same concept, same cells, right? So there is some academic data on CD19 CAR T therapy, so again, cells that target the CD9 receptor of B cells. There's a small cohort of data by a group called Schett's group in Germany. It's academic data. So I'm just going to walk you through, and the results are pretty impressive. This was the initial 5 cohort of patients, and you can see on the left, you can see those big bars. That's their SLEDAI score, and SLEDAI is the instrument that assesses all of the disease activity in all of the organs. So these are patients who had pretty severe disease. As you can see, some of them have SLEDAI scores of 15 or higher. So they have multi-organ disease. They've tried different agents. But as you can see, within a few months, within 3 months, their SLEDAI score right next to each one of them, it actually falls down to pretty low levels, almost 0. And then when you look at the various laboratory measures, if you look at the next panel, proteinuria, you know, some of these patients had kidney involvement. And as you can see, their urine protein creatinine ratio goes down. Complement, which is actually used in inflammation, so if you have less inflammation, the levels of complement go up. You can see that going up. Double-stranded DNA, as I said, you know, you produce autoantibodies. Those levels are going down, and the patients are all improving in fatigue. Actually, all of these patients achieved DORIS remission, and actually DORIS remission requires 0 clinical disease activity. And actually, what DORIS requires is unstable immunosuppressants. Here, the patients were able to get off their background medications. And this effect now, this is in 5 patients. They've also included another 3 patients. And I think we're up to about 2 years of data. So it's been pretty durable based on that one infusion. Okay, so we at Cabaletta, we're also pursuing lupus. We have our own CAR T agent called CABA-201. It has very similar construct, structure, and function to the academic group. So we're expecting similar data. We have an ongoing phase 1/2 study. And these are in patients who are 18 to 65. They have a diagnosis of lupus. They've tried agents. And it's an open label study. So it's a cohort of 6 patients with general lupus and 6 patients with nephritis. And you can see the overall design. We're looking at safety. We're also measuring clinical efficacy and serology and effect on other laboratory markers. So this study is ongoing. So like I said, we at Cabaletta Bio, we are committed to bringing out the first curative cell therapy for lupus. Our study, which is called the RESET SLE study, is ongoing. We have sites up and activated, and I'll show you those. The first patient has been dosed and has been followed out to 28 days. We've not seen any safety issues. So when you have a CAR T cell that targets a B cell, sometimes cytokines or chemicals are released, and that can give the patient some symptoms. We have not had any cytokine release syndromes. We've not had any neurotoxicity in this patient after 28 days. So we'll continue to follow, and we're continuing to enroll. So here's where we are. We have about 8 sites, and I think we'll probably have 9 in the near future. And we're activating other sites as well. So if you'd like more information, here's our QR code, and I'll be around, and there's others from Cabaletta Bio here if you'd like any more information. Great, and thanks, and I just want to thank, everybody for this journey, because it's very rare to get an opportunity to work on 2 treatments. My first one was successful, now I'm here again.
No, okay. Give it to, our next speaker is Dr. Edgar Charles from Bristol Myers Squibb.
Okay, thank you. It is really a delight to be here. I'd love to thank LFA for inviting me to speak with you today, and I'd like to thank all of you as patients and advocates. This is a really important time for lupus research. It's an exciting time, but thank you for giving your time today and tomorrow, and continue to be warriors for lupus and for finding better cures. I think advocacy is a critical endeavor, and it's something that really can pay real rewards for the entire community. So thank you for your selfless endeavors. So I'm going to speak a little bit with you today about what we're doing at BMS to advance therapies for patients with lupus. We have several programs, and they span the spectrum of clinical research. And we've built these programs based upon feedback from you and your needs. And of course, we're always looking for more input from you as to how to make our programs even better. So many of things that we have heard from patients, we've built into our programs to investigate things that are important for you and important for your disease. And we're looking to improve upon existing medicines with improved therapies that are safe and effective for lupus. So the most advanced candidate we have in testing right now is deucravacitinib, and that is in phase 3 of development. We're looking in patients with lupus, systemic lupus, as well as in patients with cutaneous lupus, and that program is in phase 2. We also have afimatorin, which is in phase 2, a little bit behind in clinical development. Phase 2 is the intermediate stage of drug development, where we try to figure out the optimal dose to move forward into the confirmatory definitive phase 3 trials. And then finally, we also have a CAR T program. So thank you, Raj, for introducing the concept of CAR T. Our CAR T is very similar to Cabaletta's in principle, in that we're targeting B cells with patients' own T cells. So these are T cells that are taken from the body and then expanded in the laboratory and then reinfused into patients to try to take out the B cells that cause disease. And our next CAR T program is earlier in development. It's in phase 1. So a little more about deucravacitinib, which is our lead in phase 3 of development. Deucravacitinib also goes by the name of Sotyktu, and we're studying it in the so-called POETIC SLE studies. And these are 2 companion phase 3 studies of about 500 patients each that are being conducted worldwide. Deucravacitinib is an oral pill, and it works by targeting a protein on the surface of immune cells. And this protein normally exists on immune cells, and it helps communicate signals from the outside in. And we know in large studies of patients with lupus that people who don't have this protein or have copies of this protein that don't function at a very high level they're actually protected from lupus. So that gave us a good reason to think, hey, this might be a great protein to try to target in patients with lupus to try to tamp down their disease. So by blocking this protein, we can help block some of the signals coming into immune cells that cause the production of a lot of the disease-causing cytokines in lupus, such as type 1 interferon. The advantage of deucravacitinib is it's an oral pill, and so far it seems to be safe and efficacious in phase 2 studies in patients with lupus. We want to confirm that in our phase 3 study. It's already approved for patients with psoriasis, so it has a track record in other autoimmune conditions and skin conditions where it's been proven to be safe and effective. We don't have FDA authorization for lupus yet, but we're certainly working on it with our phase 3 program. And we're also looking at deucravacitinib in other diseases such as Sjogren's disease as well as psoriatic arthritis. So next up is afimatorin. This is also an oral therapy, and it also targets an immune protein that sits at the interface of the outside in of immune cells, and it targets a protein known as toll-like receptor 7 and toll-like receptor 8. And these TLR proteins mediate signals usually from invading pathogens such as bacteria, and they sense the nucleic acids from these foreign invaders, and they help the body defend against them. But we also know in lupus that the body is fighting itself. So this protein actually takes people's own DNA and RNA and leads that signal inside the immune cell and causes a lot of type 1 interferons and other cytokines to be produced. So by blocking this protein, we can hopefully help reduce the disease of lupus. So we had an early phase 1 study in cutaneous lupus that was promising, and that led us to this dose-ranging phase 2. And now we're conducting a large phase 2 study to build upon those phase 1 results and find the optimum dose to be used in phase 3. And lastly, coming to our NEXT-T CAR-T program, we're very excited about the potential for CAR-T to transform the standard of lupus care, particularly in really, really sick patients. And there we think that the promising data from Georg Schett's group is really leading the way for us. So we are taking a next-generation CAR-T therapy, a therapy that we hope we can manufacture more easily and take some of the friction out of the system for you as patients and make the process a lot easier for patients living with lupus. So it's early days. We have just kicked off a phase 1 program in patients with lupus, and we are conducting an umbrella study looking at patients with other autoimmune diseases as well, such as myositis, inflammation of muscles, as well as inflammation of the skin, systemic sclerosis. So more to come on this. We're very, very excited about the potential and promise of CAR-T therapy. So with that, I will lead you to a QR code that, for those of you who are interested in learning more, can access and learn about the programs at BMS. And again, would love to hear from all of you about your thoughts of how we can bring better therapies to you and to your community, and in particular, bring our therapies and clinical trials to patients that are who are traditionally underrepresented in clinical trials, and particularly, as Dr. Mel said, in patients who live in rural communities who are traditionally underserved by our clinical trials. So thank you for your attention, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from Dr. Carlos Valdez from Genentech.
Hi, everyone. Again, very happy to be here. Thank you for the invite, and hope we can add to the great talks that you've heard so far. I always like to put my company's name on there. I've been with them for about 2 decades. So a lot of experience with the company. Genentech was one of the first products to produce monoclonal antibodies, which kind of differentiated from everything that had been there before. I think the rheumatologists in the room will be agreeing to the fact that before that, we were using just several products, a handful of products, methotrexate, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, and obviously a lot of steroids on patients. And we weren't getting the results that we wanted to. Companies like Genentech helped to change that. When I start feeling a little old, though, right? Genentech is about 30 years old. When I start to feel like I'm old and have done this too long, I start to think about Roche, which is the parent company. Roche is one of the largest companies in the world and has been around for more than 125 years, so then I don't feel so old. Anyhow, I was asked to provide a little insight into what Genentech is doing for autoimmune diseases for people with lupus. And very, very glad to see that we are getting involved. This is a slide that we showed at the American College of Rheumatology last year to rheumatologists there. Glad to see that we're getting very involved in this area. We appreciate the fact that these monoclonal antibodies shaped a lot of autoimmune diseases in the past couple of decades. It's great to see all these companies getting involved now in lupus, and I think you guys sit in a very good precipice in that things are moving forward with diseases for lupus and lupus nephritis. I'm going to concentrate on the top one there. The more horizontal bars you have to the right, the closer you are to marketing. Unfortunately, these CAR-T therapies are, and every major pharmaceutical company now has one because it is so promising, right? But they're in its infancy stages. They're in a crib yet. A lot of these other products are a little bit further along, and you might be able to see them a little sooner. And then at some point, right, the thrill for me is to see competitive trials of one versus the other to see which might be more advantageous for specific patients, because not all lupus patients are the same, right? So obinutuzumab is our product that's furthest along. It's in the oncology space right now as a marketed product by the brand name of Gazyva. And as many products tend to do, they tend to have autoimmune mechanisms that are the same for many of the diseases that nephrologists and rheumatologists treat. And so they generally come down after successes in oncology to these areas. So our next one there is crovalimab. Crovalimab is a complement inhibitor, right? And the complement system is another mechanism, not T-cell or B-cell driven, but one that is another way that the body can create inflammation and create damage. A variety of different areas in the complement system, and I'm certainly not here to, well, actually there is a test after this, I think. You guys have seen all this stuff. I'm going to give you a test afterwards. The complement system has a variety. So this one, crovalimab, targets lupus in the classical sense, but the next product, which is an antisense product, a little tiny sub-Q injection of several nucleotides, affects the liver, prevents a formation of this complement that expands the complement system and makes problems for organs like the kidney. So AFO factor B, which doesn't even have a name yet, is that type of product. And we are targeting it for problems with the kidneys and nephrology problems that occur in the kidneys. The next one is mosunetuzumab, and that is a mouthful. So I would say just call it MOSUM, which is what we call it. MOSUM is already being studied, and again, as we talked about here, there are now not just one or two targets that we're looking at, there are a lot of different targets. And so MOSUM is a biphasic specific monoclonal antibody that targets not only depleting B cells, as many of these products do, but also working on T cells as well. And that one is also being investigated. But what I wanted to focus on is what's probably coming sooner rather than later, and the things that we're doing in lupus and lupus nephritis right now. So I'm going to focus on these 4 trials that are either fully enrolled, almost there, or we're just waiting on the results. So the top one, so why do we make obinutuzumab? We have already talked about rituximab as being a B-cell depleter and one that can deplete your B cells and prevent the problems that causes. Why do we need another one? Well, as was said, Rituxan has mixed results in lupus. We didn't get the results that we thought we were going to get. And the hypothesis that we're working on right now is that we needed a better mousetrap. So what happens with Rituxan is you have to dose it every 6 months. Why? Because at the end of the 6 months, you start repleting B cells again. With Gazyva, we bioengineered a product that you still dose every 6 months, but at the end of a year and a half, some patients just have no B cells to show, whereas the rituximab, about half the patients have repleted all B cells. So the hypothesis is that if we get to those B cells that are hiding from us, because they are good at getting into spaces in the body that you can't reach with the infusion, that we will have a better result. I have a good feeling about it because this nobility trial, this phase 2 nobility trial, was presented at ACR and the nephrology conventions about a year ago and published. So nobility was a phase 2 trial looking at patients taking standard of care versus obinutuzumab, placebo or not. And we were able to show that in patients who were taking the obinutuzumab or Gazyva, these patients were able to get the bar that you should look at in a lot of these clinical trials, and you should ask your doctor, complete renal response. The reason I say that is because if you look at Kaplan-Meier curves of people that get renal problems with lupus, the ones that tend to do better are the ones that get this complete renal response. A partial response helps. I'm not saying it doesn't, but our bar in making these drugs should be complete renal response. So that was our primary endpoint, and we were able to show that in the nobility trial. We're now doing the Regency trial, which is sister study, more or less the same, and we're trying to prove to the FDA that the drug indeed does hold that. Again, the primary endpoint, complete renal response versus placebo at a year and a half. And that trial is fully enrolled, and we should see results of that trial by the end of the year, in which case you should see Gazyva with this indication by next year. We're also looking at the product, believe it or not, in kids. Sad disease. Kids with lupus nephritis between 12 to 18 years old. Again, we're giving this product to kids, trying to see if we can get them to no sign of renal problem at the end of the trial. As you all have known and heard, it's hard to enroll these trials. If you think the lupus trials are hard, you got to do a pediatric lupus trial. So if you know of anybody that's interested, please come and see me or contact Genentech to get this trial completed so we get a product indicated for this bad disease. The last trial is Allegory, and that's for patients with systemic lupus, right? So that one, again, we're looking at Gazyva plus standard of care to see if we can, in essence, using the endpoints that we have right now that the FDA considers acceptable, to show that the drug is working better than standard of care. And that one is still enrolling. It's a large trial, and we will try to finish that up by the end of the year as well, in which case, hopefully have an approval by next year for Gazyva for both SLE and for lupus nephritis. Thank you very much, and for that, I give you what Genentech likes to do. Thank you.
Anyone who's been hanging out with the LFA for a few years knows that Gary Gilkison needs no introduction.
All right. Well, thank you for asking me to be here, and it's a pleasure to be back. I feel like I'm at my 10-year high school reunion. Many of you familiar faces that have not aged as much as me. I appreciate it. Many of you are noticing he's got black shoes on with beige pants. And that's true, and I apologize for the faux pas, but at least I have a tie on. What we're talking about in my part of this panel is the mesenchymal stromal cell infusions, which is a different type of cellular therapy for lupus than are the CAR T cells. And there's differences, pluses, minuses to both, and this is a trial and a area that the Lupus Foundation has been key in and moving along from animal studies that we did to phase 1 trials, and now we're in a phase 2 trial that's almost finished, and all of those have been supported by the Lupus Foundation and the NIH. So we're doing it. This is the first and only multi-center placebo-controlled dose escalation trial using mesenchymal stromal cells in lupus. There are 9 centers participating all around the country that you can see. The phase 2, like I just talked about, start is what we're doing now. The first patient was enrolled in November of 2018, and I don't remember what it was, but something happened in 2019 and 2020 that caused a slowdown in the trial. But thanks to the support from the LFA and the NIH, as well as the centers themselves and the patients, we have been able to persevere on. We are going to treat total of 81 patients. We've treated 75 thus far, and so we hope to be finished by the end of June or perhaps into July. It's a 2-to-1 randomization, so 1 patient gets placebo, 2 patients get the MSCs, and as said in many of the other trials that are mentioned, you continue on your immunosuppressive therapy, but we try to taper and get you off prednisone. So what are MSCs? These are cells that we all have in every organ in our body. They are multipotent. They're not stem cells. They can't make blood cells. They can't do other things, but what they do make is this kind of the stratum, our bones and our cartilage and our fat. Some of us, the MSCs are working too hard in that area. But you can isolate them from adult bone marrow, from adipose tissue, as well as umbilical cords. And so umbilical cords is where the action is at this point in time because they're fairly easy to obtain. Most women don't take those home. The nice thing about them is that they can be expanded very rapidly. They're what we call relatively immune privileged, so we give you, these are allogeneic cells. They're not autologous. They're not your cells, but they're coming from an umbilical cord from someone else, but you'd think we would have to match them, but you don't, because they have special properties that allow us to infuse them into different individuals or even different species. So we may be able to cure lupus in elephants. But that's not what we're working on right now. So they can be given without HLA matching. They do not require preconditioning of the patients. There's no pheresis, there's no hospital stay, there's no Cytoxan and 5-FU given to deplete your marrow before you get the cells. So there are differences. So this all started by a gentleman, Dr. Lin Young Soon, in Nanjing, China, who began treating lupus patients with MSCs. And as you can see, similar to some of the CAR T-cell data, there was an impressive decrease. These are very sick patients that had failed Cytoxan and Cellcept. And you can see that their SLEDAI scores, their activity got better, their proteinuria got better, and their T regulatory cells improved. So based on that data, we started undertaking these studies. I still collaborate with Dr. Soon, but we did a phase 1 trial in 6 lupus patients, again supported by the LFA. And as you can see, over time, the numbers go up and down, but over time, 1 of the 6 had to drop out due to unrelated health issues. Of the other 5, all of them reached what is called a SRI, or response index, and 3 of them achieved complete remission for a while. So of those, all but one of them have reflared over the last 5 or 6 years, but one of them we've retreated and she went back into remission. So the one thing that we're very happy about, we hand-selected the centers that are participating, and as you can see, we have on the far right, out of the total of 75 now, we have approximately 50% that are African American participants. And so that was one of our goals, and one that we're it's somewhat based on us being in Charleston, South Carolina, Atlanta being in Emory, but we're very happy that all the centers have made that a priority. Interim results of this trial, it's double-blind, placebo-controlled. Our head statistician won't allow us to do anything analysis-wise, or we could break the blind of the trial, which would be not good, be disastrous. So when the ones that have reached the 24-week time point, approximately 60% have achieved the primary endpoint, which this is the same endpoint that was used for the Safnello trials and the Benlysta trials. Approximately 60% have achieved that endpoint. We don't know how many of those are placebo or how many of those are received the cells. If they responded at 24 weeks, almost all of them have remained responding at 52 weeks. The beauty of these cells is that there is no serious side effects that have been noted in our trial as well as in other trials and other diseases. So there's no increased infections, no increased cancers. They're safer than drinking water, because if you drink too much water, your sodium can get too low. This doesn't happen with these cells. So they don't take the place of water, but they're very safe to this point in time. So we're hoping to reach 24-week, hope to have the last patient enrolled in the next 2 months, and that means the last patient will reach the endpoint at December of this year, and so we're hoping to have the results of that out early in the new year. So where do we go from here? I won't take too long with this, but we do have a port forward. Moving forward, if this trial is successful, then we've preliminarily met with the FDA, and we'll meet with them such that if it's successful, they will consider allowing them to be licensed to treat lupus patients. If it's equivocal, there will be a phase 3 trial done, sponsored by a company called Mesencyte that we're working with. There are variations of these, just like with the CAR Ts, such that we're starting a trial of giving them subcutaneously rather than intravenously, thinking that will allow them to stay around longer. So that ended my talk, and we'll hand it over to our more illustrious member of our panel.
Well, it's time to start practicing, so I'm going to introduce Dr. Ugochukwu, even though she will not be one till Wednesday.
Let me see if I can work this thing. Do I have to click anything? Okay, no I don't. Okay, perfect. So yes, I'm Adobe Ugochukwu. I'm so happy to be talking to you all today. This is actually my 3rd Lupus Advocacy Summit, and it's just always a wonderful time just seeing so many fellow lupus warriors. So thank you all so much for coming from all over the country to come and advocate on Capitol Hill with all of us. And so I'm a Florida native. I grew up in Tallahassee, Florida. Oh yeah, okay, yes, yes. Okay, yes. Florida, we don't get that response these days that often, so we appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. So yes, I'm a pediatric lupus patient, so part of that 20% of lupus patients who are diagnosed before the age of 15. And so my symptoms first started when I was 9 years old, so as you can imagine, very difficult. And I had really bad symptoms, like really bad arthritis, so I couldn't walk well. I had pericarditis, so the sac around my heart got inflamed. I had really bad skin ulcers, and I had really bad anemia. So if I would take a couple steps, I would be out of breath and ready to collapse. And so I had these symptoms for several years. My parents weren't really sure what was going on. I, of course, wasn't sure what was going on. So I didn't get a diagnosis until the age of 12. And fortunately, I've had really great support. So I had really great pediatric rheumatologists at the University of Florida, and I had my first adult rheumatologist there as well. And now I live in Baltimore, have awesome rheumatologists there, so I've had really great doctors who have taken care of me. And then also the support of you all, you know, the fellow lupus warriors, and just being a part of this community. And I remember when I first started going to support groups, I was like, this is what it feels to be part of like a family. People who understand what it's like to go through what you're going through. And so, as everyone's been mentioning, I'll be graduating from Hopkins on Wednesday, and very, very excited. Yes. And I'll be doing pediatrics because I just love pediatrics. I tried to get into adult medicine, but I was like, that's not for me. So really, really love pediatrics. And plus, my lupus started when I was a child, so I really feel like that's the community that I really connect with. So I'll be doing my pediatric residency at Children's National here in DC. Yes. And then doing pediatric rheumatology fellowship, and that is still undecided where that'll be. But I really just want to just help children with lupus, with other autoimmune diseases, just so they don't feel like how I felt. Because what I always would tell people is that lupus stole my childhood. I didn't have a regular childhood, and I don't want other children to feel that way. And so anything that I can do to help them lead a fulfilling life is just more than enough for me. And so, next slide. Do I advance it with the clicker? Oh, did I go there? Okay, yes. So what has my lupus experience been like? So as you can imagine, growing up with lupus was very difficult. College was really, really difficult. Medical school was really difficult. Actually, I started medical school in 2017. So, you know, a lot of people know that medical school is supposed to be 4 years. For me, it's been 7 because I've had to do leaves of absence because of the lupus. And so having to manage all the hospitalizations that can last for months, all of the treatments, you know, the infusions with the biologics and all those side effects, and then just all the uncertainty of like what is going to happen in the future. It's just been really tough. But like I said, this is support from the community, from my family, from my friends has really gotten me so far. And even though my journey has been really delayed, interrupted, I just feel that, you know, focusing on what you have in the future, what that goal is, just really helps carry you so far. And I've been really motivated to participate in lupus awareness, lupus advocacy. I lead a support group through the LFA, and I really feel that just serving in roles through the LFA has given me so much more meaning. And it's made me stop asking why me, and then start asking why not me. Because so many silver linings, I've just seen so many of them over the years, and I really feel like, okay, this is why I have lupus. This is the purpose for my life. And so I want to talk to you all about why do we participate in research. And so I remember when I was 15, that's when I first learned that lupus research was a thing. And I really want to thank you all for devoting your careers and your lives to lupus research and all of that, because I was just amazed that people who had never met me, who didn't even know me, were really dedicating their lives to making sure that my life was better. And it just motivated me so much. And the reason I do research as a participant, as a researcher myself, is because it's just investing in the future. Because I've met people with lupus who have had lupus for decades, who are diagnosed like back in the 60s and the 70s, and they endured and sacrificed so much for us. So why don't we do that for everyone in the future whose diagnoses are yet to come? And there's so many questions that we have yet to answer. We don't even really know what causes lupus. You know, we'll say genetics and the environment and, you know, female hormones, but really we don't have an answer yet. And so in order to get those answers, we need to take part in research. And plus, by doing research, we can get those treatments. Because I know that I would not be able to walk across the stage on Wednesday if it wasn't for the treatments that I've had over the years, the biologics that were developed that have helped me really have the ability to keep up with my studies and to be able to go to school. And so I really just want to ask you all to ask yourselves, why do I want to participate in research? Because that's a question you have to ask yourself and provide an answer for. And for each person, it's going to be a different answer. But it's always so important to ask yourself that, because participating in lupus research is just so important. And I always tell people that while we're keeping our eyes on the future for a cure, we're also just really in the present as well, trying to improve our quality of life. And our voices are so important. The researchers, the physicians, they need to hear our voices, because what good is any medication or any clinical trial if it doesn't improve our quality of life? Because we want to raise our families, we want to go to work, we want to go to school, we want to engage in hobbies, we want to do all the things that give life meaning. And in order to be able to do that, we have to be well enough to do that. And so really, these medications, these treatments, are just to help us be the best that we can be. And I also believe that by engaging in research and having these treatments, I'll be able to look forward to the next phase of life. Because from the age of 9, I've been apprehensive about every next stage. All my peers, my classmates, they get excited for college, med school, residency. I'm scared, because I don't know what lupus will do. My lupus is flaring right now. I don't know what will happen next month when I'm supposed to start residency. Will it be quieter? Will it still be roaring so loud? But with treatments, maybe I can be excited like my peers are. Maybe I can have that kind of hope for the future like they do. And so that's why research is so important. And I want to talk about LRAN. So I'm an LRAN member, and my fellow LRAN members also stood up. Yes. And so LRAN, we are really just fellow lupus warriors trying to help other lupus warriors learn about the importance of research. And really, we're focused on making sure that those groups that are most impacted by lupus are well represented in clinical trials. And so I know that clinical trials can be daunting. It can be, especially if you haven't engaged in lupus research yet, it can be really scary. But start small. Sign up for a cohort. If you're near like a teaching hospital, an academic medical center, you can sign up to be a part of their cohort. And just every time you go to the doctor, they'll just take into account your clinical data and add that to the cohort, and nothing more. Or you can give blood, you can give urine. It doesn't have to be big. But every little thing counts, because we're all just working towards the same future. And so I'll also talk about the importance of diversity in clinical trials. I've already kind of talked about this, but if we want for the results of clinical trials to be applicable to us, we have to take part. And if we want our doctors and our physicians to feel comfortable prescribing these medications to us, we have to be well represented. And so that's why it's so important for us to take part in this. But also want to acknowledge that we can have concerns, and all of our concerns are valid, because throughout the history of this country, we know that it hasn't been positive for Black people. We know that that's the truth. And so we know that there has been mistreatment. I mean, we can talk about Tuskegee. I'm at Johns Hopkins, so I know about Henrietta Lacks. And so we know that this has happened in the past. And so our concerns about that history are completely valid. And so me, myself, especially as a pediatric patient, if there's any side effects of these medications, I'm gonna have to live with them for decades to come. So I make sure to educate myself. What are the rules that you all have in place now? What are the regulations that you have in place, the safeguards, to make sure that it's not going to be a replication of the 1940s? And so I encourage all of you to educate yourselves as well. And ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions, especially during the informed consent process. Ask questions. I always tell my friends, be a Nigerian. I'm Nigerian. Be a Nigerian. Nigerians, we will ask questions. I don't care if you're feeling some type of way. I will make sure my voice is heard. So be a Nigerian, but just only in that regard. And also make sure you know that you can leave a study, leave a trial at any time for any reason. You don't have to explain it to anyone. You can just leave. If you're feeling the side effects are getting to be too much, or just feeling uncomfortable with what's going on for any reason, you can leave. So remind yourself that you have control and you have the power, and our voices need to be heard. So thank you all so much.
Any questions?
I'm just glad I didn't have to follow that.
I put her last for a reason. Somebody bringing a mic over here? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Michelle. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. So I am lucky enough that through standard of care, I don't have necessarily active disease. My organ involvement is under control, but I still feel like garbage all the time. I'm hearing some reaction to that. So for years, I thought that I had this disconnect between myself and my rheumatologist, that she was satisfied with my care because I wasn't, necessarily at risk of hospitalization all the time, but I was not satisfied because I did not feel well, and as you alluded to, I want to live my life. Then earlier this year, she came in and told me that she was involved with the phase 1 CAR-T trial. I'm not sure which of you it is, but it's at Washington University in St. Louis. She's involved with that. She would love to get me enrolled in the study, but she can't because it's controlled through standard of care. Now, if she stopped my standard of care, I would have active disease activity. I would have the score that would qualify me for the trial, but then I wouldn't qualify for the trial because the trial is only for patients who are on standard of care. Yeah.
Right.
So 6 weeks ago, I was in the rheumatology clinic again, and I told her I was coming here. And so she expressed to me again frustration that she said, I feel like I'm treating a different lupus patient than I used to. And I'm doing this clinical trial, but I can't get the patients that I want to necessarily enrolled in it. So my question is from both myself and my rheumatologist. At some point, are we going to work on getting clinical trials for people who are maybe doing just okay on standard of care, but not well enough to really be out there living our lives?
I'm going to turn you over to Dr. Chamala in a minute. But did you get that? Did you get that that thing that we were showing you?
The survey, yes, I
Yeah,
filled it out.
because please fill it out. We need you. Okay.
Oh, and I should say I am enrolled in Ray as well.
I'm sorry, I missed that last part.
I'm enrolled in Ray, the research accelerated by you through
Okay.
LFA.
Yeah, so I think with regards to, I think your point is, I have to come off my standard of care to meet the inclusion criteria, but then the study requires me to be on standard of care, right? I think ours is an open label study, so
No. She's saying,
Yeah.
if I go off standard of care, I'll get sick. This is what and I can assure you,
Yeah.
there are many rheumatologists concerned about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I mean, that is a dilemma, especially in standard, because we want to ensure that we're able to get the cells and expand them and all. And lupus in particular, it's a pretty hard disease. I think there's that time period, and I think it's always on an individual basis where we could probably do something, to tide you over that gap. But it's always an individual patient where your physician talks to us, and actually we have one of our physicians actually in the audience as well who's leading our lupus study. So there'll be a conversation between them and us. But I think we can tide you over, maybe not with your standard of care, but at least something to get you over. It depends on it, okay? And we've done that kind of stuff. But I don't know if John Hogan's on thing. So we can touch base with you on that.
Okay, so he's suggesting there might be some flexibility, but really, this is all about trial design.
It is a dilemma, yeah.
And we're all working our way through it. And so really, this forum is a very good place for people to come up with ideas how we could do clinical trials a little bit differently. Yeah.
There is the disconnect that you were talking about that's very common, and now Dr. Pazetsky and some have come up with this B symptoms and A symptoms, where the A's are the nephritis, the arthritis, the skin disease, and the B's are the horrible fatigue and the brain fog and all that. And so we look at the anti-DNA and your complements and your urine. Well, that all looks great, so you're doing fine. But the majority of patients are like you and don't feel fine. And so we are There is research working on that area, whether CAR T cells would make that go away or not. It'll make your A symptoms better, probably, but it's probably not going to have a whole lot to do with your B symptoms until we figure out better what's causing those. But you may have active A symptoms too, so I don't know. But.
Anybody else?
In the back? Oh, she's standing up here.
About studies in neuropathy, and even when my lupus and my Sjogren's is under control, I have a flare now with the Sjogren's, but the neuropathy can be torturous.
May I ask you a question? Have
Yes.
you had ongoing symptoms of neuropathy for a very long time?
Yes.
You may have damage, and it may not be reversible with the usual drugs that people try for you.
No, they think it's permanent.
Yeah.
But I was just wondering
You're
if
absolutely right. We need to do something about this, and we have not.
because if there's any symptom that makes me feel like I have a disability,
Yeah,
it's the neuropathy.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't have an answer for you. Does anybody else? Because this is an area very poorly studied. But when people have lupus damage the body, we don't yet have a whole lot of ways to reverse it, although there are some interesting drugs called antifibrotic drugs that for some kinds of damage may be helpful. I'm not so sure for this, though.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Aliyah, and I represent the great state of Maryland. I want to thank Dr. Gilson for including in your presentation demographic data. For those of us that are primarily affected by this dis-ease, it's really critical to find ways to reach out to these individuals and quiet our angst about the historic impact of medicine on our communities. So for the three big pharmas that are present, what are you doing to ensure that some of the PTSD that we have experienced, you quiet that noise in order to get us to be more receptive to participating in these clinical trials?
Can I add to that? How about the experience that many people have going to the doctor today, not just historically, where they don't feel listened to, they feel like they're not believed?
The only thing is that my question is not so much about the doctors, because yes, we do experience that. But if you want us to get involved in these clinical trials, and the big pharmas have the resources to help with the education and outreach, I want to know what are they doing?
So, it's a wonderful question. I mean, this is, as you rightly point out, I think this is central to our endeavors. I think, we have a educational effort to try to reach communities. This isn't a conversation that can happen in the doctor's office in 5 minutes. I think it's important to have a conversation around the history of racism in this country, particularly as it affects the research endeavors in the medical profession and the pharmaceutical profession. Have open conversations. And build trust in the community. So we're trying to partner with communities, partner with patients living disease, hearing what is on their minds and responding to it. And this is years, decades that this is going to take, but we're starting now. And can we do more? Yes. So if you have ideas for us to how best to have these conversations and to reach out to your communities, we'd love to hear them.
So we have a trial going on right now where you have to get vaccinated against, these are strong immunosuppressive agents. You have to get vaccinated against these diseases before you get on the trial. You talk about difficult to enroll, let alone minorities and so forth. This is a big one. I think most of these companies, I'm not going to speak just for mine, but I get the feeling, right, that they're trying to be much more inclusive than they ever have been. And like you said, it's not going to be just an overnight thing. This is going to be a process with community involvement, with our doctors that are doing the trials and so forth. But I do see an effort there. In my company, we've tried to take as much of the problems out of the patient's hands. We'll give them travel to the sites. We've got patients, I live in Miami, we got patients that come from the Caribbean, that we bring them in, we fly them in from other places. We pay them for losing time at work, babysitting, things like that. So we're trying our best to do that. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to have to be even more resources doing the education. We're going to have to educate these patients that fear these vaccinations that it indeed is a good idea to do that before you get on this trial. You don't want to get taking a drug that might give you the disease that's even worse than the one you have. So I think going to take a while, but we certainly are making large strides for that. I don't want you to think that we're not. It's a great point and great question.
Also, education goes two ways, and so part of the purpose of all of this and what the LFA is trying to do is bring your ideas in to some of these trials, because we're just not going to get anywhere the way we're going right now.
I'm Kate. I'm from Philly, but I live in California. I had a really, really bad reaction to I think it was the third COVID vaccine, the Pfizer, and I probably will never take a vaccine again after that. It just caused such a bad flare, and it was like the worst pain I've ever had in my life. So if you're trying to get people to, do these trials, but they're having these vaccine reactions, I would never do that trial if I had to do these vaccines.
Well, that's sort of a fact that a lot of people don't know is that, and it's not every lupus patient, but there is a tendency among lupus patients to have very bad reactions, sometimes even flares in response to vaccines. So.
Hi, I am Savannah Burks out of Wisconsin. I have a nonprofit 501c3 called Lupus Has No Face. I have a two-part question. First, one of you guys said that you're trying to get away from prednisone. My concern when I was younger, because I got diagnosed at a younger age as well, I was on such a high dose of prednisone, which I didn't have a quality of life as well as a minor child. But it worked, but it caused me to get surgeries because it deteriorated my bones. So when you guys say you want to get away from the prednisone, what would you guys have in place to take care of that problem? Like you're fixing one thing and causing another problem. And then my second question is that you said racism. It's that, and it's also the big entities, the big umbrella, and it's the smaller entities underneath that has a hard time working together. I feel like everybody should be collaborating if the goal is to cure lupus or to have a better quality of lupus. And those things that you guys spoke about are not known. Even if you research it, it's very held sacred, like gatekeeping, and you got to come to things like this to know of. So those umbrellas, I feel like they should have those informations to spread over the communities in their community before they go outskirt. So we all can be on the same page and reach different people, because everyone reach different people in different ways.
Yeah.
I mean, the goal with the prednisone is that these treatments will make the prednisone unnecessary, that they're going to control the inflammation and other things that cause discomfort and everything going on. And prednisone is great at controlling those, but it has bad side effects over time. So the hope, and all of these, the FDA looks at it and everything, the goal of is ability to taper and get off prednisone for people. And these drugs can the ones that we already have and all that can do that. We often talk about prednisone as a bridge when we're starting one of our new therapies because it takes them time to work. So the hope is that over time you wouldn't need the prednisone anymore.
Yeah, I think it's also important how this works out in a clinical trial when we absolutely do not know if we can get rid of the prednisone or not. They can be designed in ways where you slowly taper the prednisone, and then if that doesn't work out, you get your prednisone back, because the clinical trials are not there to make people sick. They're there to see if it's possible to make people better. And you're still contributing a great deal to the clinical trial if you don't respond to the drug and need your prednisone back, because then we know that for you it didn't work. And now we're doing better science to try to figure out, is your immune system exactly the same as people who seem to have a better response to the drug? And maybe we'll learn how to better pick drugs for patients in the future that way. So it's not about taking away the prednisone so much as it's about seeing whether we can take away the prednisone.
No patient wants to take prednisone, so it doesn't matter.
Well, nobody wants to take prednisone, that's true.
And just regarding the second point of the second part of your question, I think a one-size-fit-all approach isn't going to work. We need to have tailored engagements, tailored communications, depending upon who the audience is, who the people are at the table. So whether it's a 15-year-old's not going to have the same conversation as a 35-year-old, for example. So even within geographic regions, different ages, different backgrounds can affect the best way to have the conversation, whether it's social media or a conversation at a national level, international level through print, radio, television, or more grassroots organizations. But again, would love to hear ideas.
So we can know all the things that is going on in the education that is going on, instead of having some rheumatologists, they don't really know. So it's a trial-based, like they'll give you a certain doses of medication, you complain for over 6 or 7 months, and then they taper you down. So I think it should be some type of standard across the boards. Instead of starting you off at a high dose, you can start at a low dose and kind of see how that works. But I do think that we should have the same knowledge and education at the lower level, especially in all the rheumatology, so they can convey that to the families for a better quality of life. Thank you.
And I think we are seeing harmonization across the guidelines, especially nowadays, where it's much clearer on what the med should be and when and how. So I think there's improvement.
We're getting better guidelines. We're obviously not in care for lupus where we wish we would be. 2 more questions?
I don't have a question.
Good morning.
You have a statement?
Yes, hi.
Hi.
I'm from Savannah, Georgia. My name is Tia Brightwell. Hi. I was diagnosed in 2013 with lupus. Took a really downturn. I had a lot of surgeries. I was on Plaquenil. I was on steroids. I was injecting myself. Got COVID. Took myself off of all of those medicines because they could not determine what was killing me, right? My lupus is still active. I'm very active. As you can see, I was 330 pounds. I started a nonprofit. I started bringing awareness just to families like mine who are on Medicaid and Medicare, right? But you still have to pay a primary care doctor $75 to $85 after being dismissed from your doctors who say you talk too much and you're a little bit more advocacy than we want. So they kind of kicked me out. I don't have a doctor. So I'm hoping before I leave here that someone would say, listen, this woman has an active lupus case, right? She is focused on wellness, mind, body, and soul. What trial can we put her in to determine a real cure for women like us? Women who do it all, and no one does anything for us at all. We do it all. Can I get that? If you are mom, you do it all. If you are walking in your ankle age, but there's nothing there. Even in Savannah, we have to travel to Atlanta to be seen. Our rheumatologists, they have the nerves to say, we don't want to see you. You know know too much, you're talking too much, but we don't have any help. So I would like to see that before I leave, like help, 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 help. I need that. I need the funding. I have a 501c3, and this beautiful lady behind me does as well. And she gives a platform to women like myself to say, we need to be heard. We shouldn't feel invisible. I should walk in a room and they should say, there is Tia, that's a lupus warrior. There is whoever, there is Salakia, there are lupus warriors, but we are so clap up.
Yeah.
We are dismissed.
Tia,
We are dismissed.
Tia, you are heard, and now go be heard on the Hill, please.
Yes, I
One more.
Good morning. Hi, my name is Brandy Prosser Dotson. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina, proud member of Lambda Sigma Sigma Lupus Sorority Incorporated. My question is specifically surrounding the placebos in trials, and I noticed it was one of the questions with the survey that we took. And so I guess I'm currently a part of a trial, and I'm not going to lie, it was a long-term trial, so I finished the first year, but it was a double-blind study. And so what exactly is the point behind it? I noticed the question specifically said that you may not be able to get the drug approved if there aren't a placebo in it, but for me,
Good question.
it really messed with my mind because I'm like, I feel good and I think it's helping, but the entire time it was definitely riddled with, but what if I'm taking a placebo?
Yeah,
What if
I hear you.
making myself think that it's working for me?
Yeah. What that question actually said, you might have more trouble getting the drug approved. But this is a really controversial question. There are ways of doing trials where people could get the real drug and then some of them could taper off, but others wouldn't, and that would be blinded. But that way you at least got to try the real drug. Most studies let people get on the real drug if they, get through a certain amount or if they flare. Different designs of these trials where you can eventually get the real drug if you got randomized to placebo. But I hear you about that 1 year thing because my patients hated that idea. I got to go a whole year on placebo. I don't think that the community is going to put up with that anymore, and we've got to get better trial design. So bring it in, tell us about it.
I want to thank Dr. Merrill and thank to our panel for an excellent session. And a couple things before we go to a quick break. One is a lot of the questions, we heard a lot of different questions. I want to encourage folks to really visit the Ray booth out here, Research Accelerated by You. A lot of the information that in your experiences by sharing it in Ray can help us address many of these challenges. And the other thing too is you can also through Ray learn more about research studies, whether it's clinical trials or other different types of studies that you may be eligible to participate in. So it's a great way to also not only share your experiences and the challenges that you've had and the preferences that you have. What do you want to see in a treatment? What do you want to see in care? It's a great way to provide that information to help inform all of their work and also the medical community and ultimately payers, people who pay for care, insurance. It's going to help inform and improve access as well. So definitely encourage you to visit the Ray booth out there. We are going to take about a 10-minute break, a little bit shorter break. For those of you, I forgot to mention this morning, bathrooms are across the way, across the foyer here. And then we have a breakout session, the self-care breakout session. For those of you who registered for that, you had to pre-register for it. That's going to be one floor up. It's floor -2. We're on -3 here. So one floor up, it's a congressional room. And we have staff outside stationed at the escalators as well as the elevators. And again, if you're going up to that session, don't forget to press -2. Do not just hop on the first elevator that opens up because you may go to the 14th floor. So yeah, we'll be back here in about 10 minutes, so about 11:20, yes.
When I hear research I've been with my wife all these years, and you say Susan G. Komen. Who all knows about Susan G. Komen? Who all has seen a Susan G. Komen commercial? When I met my wife, I did not know what lupus was, and I'm pretty diverse in it now. My family still isn't diverse in what lupus is. So my question is why isn't there a commercial on TV about lupus, about your research, about signing up for your research? If you want to reach people, which I'm not a big social media person, it's obvious social media works. So why isn't there more advertisement going on about lupus? We participated on a lupus walk in Kansas, on the Kansas side. There's one on the Missouri side as well. But my thing is you can have all the walks you want, and it still doesn't get out because people still are asking what is lupus.
For drugs, you can't have a commercial till the drug's approved. There is a commercial for Benlysta.
But I'm asking why aren't there any commercials?
Because we don't have many.
Educate people about lupus
Good,
itself.
good question.
You say Susan G. Komen or any other illness or any.
The answer to that is the answer to many, many other questions that we're all pretty passionate about. We don't have the money.
So then why are we not going to the Capitol?
We're going to the Capitol.
We're asking for funding, but can we be a little more direct?
We're going to the Capitol. That's what we're doing.
Okay.
That's what we're doing.
And I'm sorry for being so late. I just couldn't digest that, though.
All good.
Thank you.
Love the energy. So let's take a quick break. We'll be back here in about 10 minutes, 11:20.
catch up and talk.
Understandably.
Yeah.
So we're going to get started. Hopefully people will come back in the room in a minute. But I want to get started so everyone can shh. Thank you. So we have a really, really good session right now. And this is one of the ones I'm really, really excited about because we're going to talk about some of the federal programs that exist that are helping to unlock the mysteries of this disease in programs at the NIH, the Department of Defense, the Office of Minority Health, and they're doing different things. And the really cool thing is that they're all talking to each other. We actually have a meeting, and I was talking to Dr. Criswell about this. We have a meeting later this week of the Lupus Federal Working Group. And this is a meeting, and actually all three of you will be there. It's a meeting of the federal agencies that are working in lupus, and there's a lot of them. So we have NIH, DOD, the Office of Minority Health, we have the FDA, we have the CDC, and we are an acronym city. There's a ton of acronyms here. But the point is there's a lot of work going on in lupus, a lot, across the federal government. And they're talking to each other. They're talking to each other to coordinate, to strategize, to identify priorities, and to complement each other, which is awesome to see. They're not duplicating. And the really, really cool thing about this for me is that the direct result of what you're going to do tomorrow, of going to the Hill, talking about the disease and why it's important that we need more funding, we need more research. And what you have done over the years has led to the programs that exist at the different agencies. And so, again, what you do tomorrow and what you're going to learn about today is the result of that. But what you can learn about today, you can share tomorrow in the meetings on the Hill about the great work that's going on and why we need to have more funding to support it and support more. So with that, I want to introduce our panel. Dr. Karen Kostenbader. Many of you know Karen. She is the chair of the Foundation's Medical and Scientific Advisory Council. She's also a professor of medicine at Harvard and also practices at the Brigham and Women's Hospital in my hometown of Boston. And Karen also is a veteran attendee of the summit. We spent some time on Capitol Hill together, in a snowstorm on Capitol Hill together. So it's great to have Karen joining us. Then we have Dr. Lindsay Criswell, who leads NIAMS. And NIAMS is our home institute at NIH. So all the lupus research funding isn't all funded by NIAMS, but a lot of it's coordinated by NIAMS. And most of it actually is funded by NIAMS. So thank you, Dr. Criswell, for your leadership. We have Dan Monson, who leads the lupus program at the Department of Defense. Thank you, Dan. And I've known Dan for a long time, actually in a previous role. So great to have Dan here. And then Tish Hall. And Tish is really leading a lot of our work at the Office of Minority Health. And the LRAN members, the program that we had yesterday is supported by the Office of Minority Health, really to drive participation in clinical trials and other types of research. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Karen.
Thanks, Pat. Thank you all for being here. This is very exciting. I love looking out and seeing everybody in purple. It is definitely like a little reunion, you know, new friends, old friends, everybody together, and all the excitement to go to Capitol Hill. It is really fun, and we did do it in a snowstorm once, but tomorrow will not be snowing, hopefully. So this is fun, and we're going to do this a little differently than the last panel, which was fantastic. So thanks to all the speakers from the last panel about talking to us about what's going on in biotech and pharma. But here we're not going to have any slides. We're going to talk about the federal agencies and the federal government and its contribution to lupus research. And tomorrow you're all going to go to Capitol Hill and advocate. Thank you very, very much for doing that. It's so important to go as lupus warriors and tell your story. We heard already some great stories that really will be moving and I think will contribute to the momentum that is out there for funding for lupus research. So biotech and pharma are very interested in lupus, which is great. The pipeline is full. It's a really exciting time. but also due to a lot of your actions over the past 5 years, Congress has appropriated more than $103 million in the past 5 years for the federal lupus research education and programs we're going to hear about. And the NIH, NIAMS, and other institutes has supported more than $665 million in lupus and lupus-related research in the past 5 years. So we want to keep that up. We want to keep that going. And so all of this really has been possible because of the lupus advocates, sharing your voices and your stories and fueling this conversation. So we are going to have just a little conversation. I wanted to go off script a little bit to say that tomorrow you are going to be advocating on Capitol Hill for research funding for lupus, but Tia's statement made me think that, you know, you can advocate for more, and this is my personal thought. I think our U.S. healthcare system is a bit broken, and I think that everybody needs to hear it. And there are problems with healthcare access, and as we get new medications coming to market, we don't want to worsen disparities. We want them to be available for everyone. We want everyone to have excellent lupus care, and you can bring that story and that important point to Capitol Hill tomorrow too, please. I really wanted to thank Dr. Ugochukwu. Hopefully I said that right. I'm very excited that she's going to be one of my colleagues in the future and a pediatric rheumatologist. Because we need rheumatologists, we need lupus-focused rheumatologists and pediatric rheumatologists. So thank you very much. That was great. So we're going to have a little conversation. I'm going to try to think of my feet and ask some questions of Dr. Criswell, who I know from many years. She is actually a lupus-focused rheumatologist and epidemiologist herself. And she was chief of rheumatology at University of California, San Francisco, before she moved 3 years ago to DC to take this big role as the director of NIAMS. So NIAMS is the Institute of Arthritis, Musculoskeletal, and Skin Diseases, where a lot of lupus funding comes from, but not all. And she can tell you how NIH is organized and all the different institutes. And then Tish Hall, I'll be asking questions as well about the Office of Minority Health and the Lupus Federal Research Program, and Dr. Monson as well, who is at the Department of Defense. And we're going to find out why the Department of Defense is interested in this congressionally mandated research program and why lupus is on their radar and why we hope it will stay there. With that, I think I'll start off with a question for Dr. Criswell about all this momentum over the past 5 years. So, or make it 3 because you've been here for 3, so I won't put you on the spot. But talk us through what NIAMS has done in the lupus, what you're most excited about in lupus research at NIAMS in the past few years.
Yeah, so
Please.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me? Yeah, there we go. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for all of your hard work and commitment and advocacy. I wish I could be spending the entire day with you, so thank you so much. But I'm going to look back more than a few years, a couple decades, and just say a couple of decades ago, many patients with lupus might not even survive the first 5 years of their disease. So tremendous progress is being made. And I'm going to highlight a few examples. NIAMS and other NIH institutes and other groups have contributed to research in the area of lupus that's really improved the lives of people that experience this disease. For example, we now know that most women with lupus can have a good and safe pregnancy if that's timed and planned appropriately. We also have a much better indicator of which women with lupus are most likely to experience some of the cardiovascular or heart complications. Women with lupus are 50 times more likely to experience these complications, heart attacks, strokes, than women without lupus. So it's terribly important for us to identify which people with lupus are at greatest risk so that we can be intervening early on and trying to prevent those devastating complications. Also, thanks to supportive research, we're learning more about the factors that contribute to the progression of kidney disease, one of the most feared complications of the disease. We're also learning that some of the medications that we use to treat lupus can slow down the progression of the cognitive decline that some patients with lupus experience. And as I'm sure you heard during the last session, we can be very excited about the fact that we do have some newer drugs that are being used in lupus. Some of these attack B lymphocytes, such as belimumab. Others attack the interferon pathways, such as anifrolumab. Voclosporin is another new medication that's increasingly being used for lupus. So we have a long way to go, but great strides have been made in the last few years and really over the past decade, thanks to your support.
Excellent. Thanks. Yeah. So that's adding to the momentum and the excitement, I think. Yeah, which is nice, and hopefully we'll keep it going forward. We still have a lot to accomplish. Okay. So next, Tish, in the Office of Minority Health, tell us about what's going on. I know Impact is one of the programs going on there, and maybe you can tell the audience what's going on and what the broader name means, and what other programs and initiatives are being supported.
Absolutely. So, oh, that was loud. Sorry. So the Office of Minority Health has been providing funding for lupus clinical research and outreach education since 2009. We are legislatively appropriated $2 million a year, and I heard the gentleman before we started this session talk about awareness and things like that we don't normally get. But that's what our programs do. That $2 million a year, excuse me, is not a lot of money, but we do fund 4 programs or 4 organizations to increase minority participation in clinical trials. Back in 2009, we decided that it was a great idea to not only fund lupus clinical trials, but to educate and provide awareness. So that's where we started. We have been able to build tremendous programs that not only provide tools to educate providers for better conversations between providers and caregivers, but also we have been able to provide education for peer-to-peer. So people living with lupus have a lot of support based on the 4 programs that we currently fund. One being LFA, the other is the American College of Rheumatology. We also fund the National Minority Quality Forum, which is a new organization in the game, but they are in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, and they're working with barbershops, salons, local churches, as well as for sororities and fraternities, which is not something new to working within the community, but it is new when it comes to lupus, because lupus disproportionately affects people of color and minorities of racial and ethnic minorities. So we have been able to continue to do just that. We've been able to provide the funding throughout the last, well, what did I say, 2009, and be able to provide that support. We've also been able to partner with other federal organizations like the Food and Drug Administration. So there are campaigns out there and there are social media plugs out there, but there probably aren't enough, or like the man said earlier, there's not a lot of information about lupus being publicly seen the same way that we do with breast cancer awareness. But that is what the Office of Minority Health is doing currently. And I do agree. It would be great if we could fund every organization that comes in our door for the same $2 million and not $2 million split across 5 grantees or 4 grantees.
Thank you. That's great. And I should have said earlier that we're going to talk a little bit. We'll have a little bit of a conversation and back and forth, and then we're going to open it up to you for quite a while for questions. So think about your questions. What do you want to know about the federal agencies that provide lupus research funding and education funding, and what questions do you have for them? And with that, I'll move to Dr. Monson, Dan Monson. So tell us about the lupus research program at the Department of Defense. Why does it exist? How many years has it been around? And what kind of research does it fund? Or anything else you want to tell us about that? Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So the Lupus Research Program started in FY17 at the Department of Defense. We often get the question, why is the Department of Defense funding lupus research? Well, to answer that question, I kind of have to give you some history, which is Congress first funded a disease program in the early 90s. And the advocates for that program actually went to different government agencies and shopped around to say, where should these funds for medical research be executed? And based on the, those interviews and that research, they felt that the Department of Defense would be the best place to execute medical research with the goal of keeping it patient-focused. So back in the 90s, that's where Congress started funding medical research programs. And this program at the Department of Defense, actually there was some lupus research for 12 years ending around FY17, but it was buried within another program and it wasn't guaranteed money. So it had to compete with other research topics. Luckily, through the efforts of advocates like LFA, everyone here, and others in the lupus community, now there is the Lupus Research Program, which is standalone, dedicated money that has to go to lupus research every year, and it's been funded since FY17 every year. In fact, from 17 to 19, it was $5 million a year, and in 20, it was doubled to $10 million a year, and has been $10 million since FY20. Thank you to you. So I've been with the Congressional Medical Research Programs for quite a while, even before the Lupus Research Program. And again, I thank you because I know these programs do disappear without your work and efforts and support. So I know we're here because of you, and that's why we have a focus on the patient. In addition to that, I would just add, what was it? There was one more thing I wanted to tell you about us. Well, I'm sure it'll come back to me.
You'll have the opportunity to
Sorry.
come back to it.
I've got a lot to tell you, but
No problem.
I'll pause
We'll
there.
continue the conversation. Well, thank you all for the introduction to what your agencies and programs do. I think to keep it going, Lindsay, you came to NIAMS 3 years ago. So can you tell us a little bit about, we're all getting our speaking points for tomorrow and our organization, our mind. So how does the NIH work? Where does NIAMS fit? And then can you tell us about programs like Accelerating Medicine Partnership and other big programs that are going on through NIAMS and others?
Yeah, thank you. So as you heard from Pat Waldman and Karen and others, we have to work together to make progress. And so collaboration and partnerships are critically important to our success. And at NIAMS, we really embrace those. And I also want to mention that by collaboration, I mean involving those of you who are affected, lupus patients as well. You're a very important part of the team. So I'll highlight a few partnerships and efforts that I think are highly successful and give us hope that we can continue to make more rapid progress. One of them is, as Karen just mentioned, the Accelerating Medicines Partnership. This is a super exciting team science effort that brings together the NIH, academic institutions, the FDA, industry partners, and voluntary organizations, nonprofits, to try to make progress in challenging problems. And one of the very first programs as part of this team science effort focused on lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. And that program has been remarkably successful. So successful that recently that program has expanded to include other autoimmune diseases, which we know are related to lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. So these programs really focus on trying to understand the biology of the disease so well that we can identify new targets for treatment. But not only are we learning important things about the biology of these diseases, but in the process, we're creating rich data that the entire community can be accessing to accelerate the pace of research outside these teams. Also, to a very surprising extent, these big team science collaborations have been remarkably successful to help launch careers of very early career investigators, even trainees. So this has had a tremendous impact. Another example that's at a much earlier stage, Congress is interested in autoimmune diseases generally, including lupus. For that reason, they started a new office, or they supported a new office last year, the Office of Autoimmune Disease Research. The very first program that came out of this new office focuses on environmental contributions to autoimmune disease. So this program is bringing together centers that want to develop the necessary infrastructure to try to really understand in a much more comprehensive way, what is it about the environment that's causing these autoimmune diseases? And 2 of the initial 6 awards focus on lupus. So their first annual summit to discuss some of their initial plans is happening later this week, actually. So really exciting opportunities. I also want to mention briefly the Lupus Federal Working Group. I hope that many of you are aware that for many years now, NIAMS has been coordinating this effort to bring together federal and other partners that share a concern and commitment for lupus. We're meeting again later this week. The LFA has been very active in that program, as has FDA, industry partners, Lupus Research Alliance, Arthritis Foundation, et cetera. And lastly, if I can just fit in, I also want to mention that NIAMS for many years has been convinced that in addition to funding individual investigators for their projects, we really want to focus centers that live in institutions but that can have a broad impact. Some of these centers bring together basic and clinical scientists to help translate the research. One of those centers focuses specifically on lupus. The other centers really focus on developing resources that can be shared so that each individual investigator doesn't have to create their own research resources. So these have all been really great models to try to accelerate progress in lupus and other autoimmune diseases.
Great. No, it is very exciting. These big programs, and Office of Autoimmune Diseases being brand new is very exciting. And then President Biden actually committed money for autoimmune diseases, which is wonderful. Great. Thanks. And so moving over to Tish now, I think you mentioned the LFA, and the LFA is very, very involved in helping people talk about clinical trials in their own communities. And then you also mentioned the National Minority Quality
Forum.
Quality Forum.
Yep.
That was the word I'm missing. Yeah. And they're working barbershops and salons, and that's an excellent project, I think. And Lindsay just mentioned understanding where lupus comes from and the idea that we need to disseminate and educate people because of this delay. So what's being done in those programs to think about getting the word out, I think? Why is it important? And can we prevent lupus or get people diagnosed earlier?
So our role as the Office of Minority Health is more about the education and the education of not only lupus as a disease, but also getting people to understand what clinical trials are and what they are not. One of the biggest things that we hear from people living with lupus is that it's a distrust for their provider, or it's distrust for understanding the information that is being provided. So one of the things that I think our projects have done and done really well is to provide information and awareness to the community so that they understand what clinical trials are. I will be totally honest with you. I know plenty of people living with lupus and other diseases that do have clinical trials, and the first thing when you're talking minorities is a distrust for the provider and a distrust for the medical industry as well as the federal government. That's just the honest answer. And so we do the best that we can through the programs that we fund to make sure that people living with lupus and their caregivers and their friends have an opportunity to talk. Just to be able to talk to each other, better understand what's happening. That support network that is offered through a lot of the programs that we see, peer-to-peer education. If you take someone with you to the doctor for something you don't understand, you feel a little bit better. You feel a little bit more comfortable in that conversation. Also addressing the misconceptions and the fears that people are living with. That is an opportunity for us to be able to increase that awareness and education in the community. And also, when we talk clinical trials, there are great reasons why people should be a part of clinical trials, but we also understand there are a whole lot of reasons why they don't participate. So what we advocate for or listen to our, what we call awardees, they get grants from our office, is to ensure that they're providing that information, that they are giving them an opportunity. And again, partnering is a big piece of this funding opportunity. We ask them to build public, private, and community partnerships. Where the people are, meet them there, and provide that education and also the network that they need so that they can get the care that they want.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we heard in the last session about this good problem that we have now of lots of medications in development and in clinical trials and not enough patients to fill the trials. So I think this work is really, really important, but also I would say that, you know, clinical trials are a high bar and they're not necessarily right for every person. Some of them are going to be riskier than others when we talk about the CAR T-cell trials. I hope we can get these trials filled, but there are a lot of inclusion and exclusion criteria. And then there are a lot of other ways to participate in research that are not clinical trials. And you can get your feet wet and be, you know, part of studies or observational studies and, you know, focus groups, qualitative studies, those things, because they were really important in all the things you just mentioned, and that's why all these people are in the room talking to each other, learning about lupus more and more, and then spreading that and disseminating that message. So there are lots of different ways to be involved in research. Great. Okay, Dan. I think that the way that the DoD runs their lupus research program is a bit different and involves some patients, some people living with lupus. And can you tell us what's different about the DoD research program and maybe the other thing?
Sure. Well, I'll start with the other thing. It's real easy. We were talking, why is it at the DoD? Another important reason to be at the DoD is the number of women and minority women as well. There's a great share of those joining the military, and so this is a concern for treating active duty soldiers as well as their beneficiaries. It's a huge, I can throw numbers at you, like 287,000 hospital bed days in a decade. But the point is, this is a growing concern for the military, and they're becoming more aware of it. It's also, I think the data is growing, supporting the idea that military service increases your risk for autoimmune diseases in general, or specifically for lupus. We've had some veterans that are people living with lupus that have supported this program and have talked to us about PTSD as one of the ones that certainly seems like a risk factor. So that was that. But let me get back to this question, which is how are we different? How do we do our funding? So we're just a funding agency, and it's a really exciting approach. I really enjoy working on the lupus research program because each year we go in, we have a meeting with our panel of experts, and we're lucky to actually have a panel expert here. Dr. Gilkison is right here. You guys know him. He's one of the members. So we have clinicians, researchers, and we have people living with lupus, which we kind of call consumers, and they're on this panel, and each year we discuss the science and basically try to focus in on how can we make $10 million have a huge impact on the lupus community. We always want to maximize our impact, and I define impact as something that's important for someone living with lupus, either now or in the future, right? So I don't want to mince words, and you know, all these words have different meanings. So that's really our focus, and so each year we reevaluate where we are and where we're going in the next year with this funding, and we just try to maximize that impact. And we do it differently, I think, than other organizations because we feel empowered to change everything every year if necessary. If there's something exciting coming in the next year and that's where we'll have the biggest impact, we should turn this bus and get on that new track. So I like that flexibility. I think in addition to that, so we put out our funding announcements each year. We get applications in. We also do our reviews a little differently. So we have a two-tier review process. So we actually assemble 2 panels of experts to review every application we receive. And each panel is totally independent from each other, and they're made up, again, with researchers, clinicians, and people living with lupus. And they vote on the best applications. And that first review evaluates the applications on their scientific quality and they look at them individually. And the second review panel compares applications to each other and considers, again, impact and just where the program in total could have the greatest impact for the community. So that process is slightly different than you would see with other organizations, and it results in different investments. The fact that we're stressing impact means we're a little more willing maybe to take some risks. So we try to push ourselves to get higher risk and hopefully higher reward applications funded. So it's a slightly different process. I think I would love to say, though, that we share the same goals as NIAMS and everyone here. We're all trying to find better treatments. I just think it's a real asset to approach things a little differently. We might have a slightly different portfolio than another funder would, and I think that's okay. I think you kind of want to have both approaches working at the same time to get to the same goal, and the research outcomes that we can have can be built on by other funders as well, and vice versa. So
Great, yeah, no, it's wonderful to have multiple sources of funding for lupus research and the interest from pharma. And also I wanted to say that the LFA also has a grants research program, and people living with lupus participate in it as well. So thank you to those of you who participate in these grant reviews. It's very, very important. And another thought that came to mind for just thinking, and I don't need to tell any of you this, but lupus is a special disease. It's an autoimmune disease that can affect any part of the body. So when you're thinking, as you all know, so some people get inflammatory myositis. We talked about other CAR T cell trials for myositis patients or for scleroderma patients with inflammation of the skin. Lupus is a paradigmatic autoimmune disease, which means that I think that studying it is going to lead to insights for lupus and for many other autoimmune diseases. There's all this excitement for studying autoimmune diseases in general, but I think that if we study lupus, we're going to crack the code for autoimmunity in general. There are a lot of shared mechanisms, and people with lupus overlap with a lot of these other autoimmune conditions as well. That's my aside again. Back to Lindsay now. So I know you can't really tell us exactly what to go to the Hill tomorrow and advocate for. You can't tell us at all. But in your opinion, what is being left on the table, and what could NIAMS do more of? If we were really successful, we have more funding, what would NIAMS do more of?
Yes, well, there is so much more work to be done, and we are every day leaving a lot of great ideas on the table because we don't have enough funding to take advantage of all of the emerging opportunities and to address all of the challenges and gaps still related to lupus. But in particular, clinical studies and clinical trials are often much more expensive than other research projects, so we're particularly challenged to support clinical trials. Also, large-scale efforts such as the Accelerating Medicines Partnership that I mentioned, where you're trying to bring together a diverse team of folks and tackle a very complex problem from multiple angles, very challenging for us to support those. Now, we do everything we can to leverage other resources and to identify partners, but those are really challenging. At the moment, and this really is follows from the pandemic that we are still emerging from, we're really concerned about early career investigators who might feel very discouraged about prospects for getting research funded, and in spite of the talent and passion and great ideas that they have, might make a decision to not focus on research and to try to make a difference for diseases like lupus. So we're very concerned about them. So, there are great opportunities, new tools, new knowledge, important studies to be done, important teams to fund, and we are just really challenged. We look for those with the highest impact, but there's so much more we could do with more support for our program. So,
yeah, thank you. I know lupus research is so important, but it's expensive, right? Unfortunately, lupus research is expensive. All research is expensive. It's amazing how expensive, and we do want to really encourage the next generation of bright young scientists to go into lupus and other rheumatic diseases, autoimmune rheumatic diseases, in my opinion. But hopefully, message for Capitol Hill tomorrow. Great. Okay, and Tish, I guess if we were successful in increasing minority participation in clinical research and clinical trials, where would that, what is the vision? What would that get us? Is it personalized medicine? Is it better access to medications? What all, would that bring us? Big question.
I think one, excuse me, in a nutshell, I think one of the things that it would bring us is personalized treatment for each individual. Clinical trials is one of the pieces that is not for everyone. Not everyone is selected to be a part of a clinical trial. That's something that we discuss with the 4 programs that we do fund from the Office of Minority Health. But also, every medication, every treatment is not specific to every individual. So thinking about what your care plan would look like if you were someone living with lupus, and how we can better educate the providers, the community members, the peers, your support people, what that really looks like and how we can get people enrolled in clinical trials if they desire to be. And that's the other thing. Just trying to ensure that, the push may be to have more minority presence, because we don't know if these medications actually work for this population. But we won't know if you don't participate. So being able to have programs and more funding to be able to generalize this across more spaces. We don't have enough revenue to be able to do exactly what I just described. So that would be the big picture, to be able to have people that look like the population we're talking about, to be able to be in those clinical trials and to get those treatment plans that are specific to better health outcomes.
That's great, yeah. And I always think of the backfire of the GSK, GlaxoSmithKline trials of belimumab, which was approved in 2011, the first medication approved for lupus in 60 years, but there were not enough people of African ancestry enrolled in the trials, so the FDA made them put a little warning that the medication might not work in people, African American and Black patients, which then they had to do another trial to enroll this population, and of course it works, but having a little warning, then that was a huge backfire. Right. We don't want that. We don't want disparities in access to these medications. We want them, as they come, these new exciting medications that really might revolutionize our treatment for lupus and the future for people living with lupus, to be available for everyone. So that's why I think everybody should really think about being involved in these trials if they can. Okay, Dan, since I'm kind of rotating around, how do all these agencies talk to each other, and how do you know, you have your research program, how do you coordinate between agencies and between institutes to know what's going on? That's actually a question for all of you. What kind of communication is there so that you aren't duplicating and you're covering the most impactful and important programs?
Thank you for the question. I guess one of the best ways of communicating is actually, I can go back to FY17 when the lupus research program was just getting started, and one of the first calls I got was actually Pat Wildman talking to me and also educating me that there was this lupus federal working group run by NIAMS and that they have meetings. And I said, sure, count me in. But I cannot overstate how important that group is, and it's just a group for communication. It's about twice a year. We all get on the line or in person if possible, and we share information about everything, anything. If the CDC has some new lupus numbers, they share it. If an advocacy group has a new initiative, they'll share it. If I have new funding opportunities, I share those at that meeting as well. And I can tell you, I actually have another job working on a different disease, and those advocacy groups aren't as energized and aren't communicating the way the lupus community is. And I give a lot of credit, again, to NIAMS and the Lupus Federal Working Group, and really, I guess, everyone in the lupus community. You guys really share and talk and try to help each other out in an amazing way. So that's really important. So I've loved that, and again, it's really important to me. As far as overlap, the way we avoid overlap is we actually, we call for applications, people send them in. We don't know if they've also sent the same research project to someone else. But if that one gets selected and is something we're trying to fund, before we actually fund them, we actually require them to tell us everything they've done in the last 5 years, everything that they're currently doing, and anything that's pending in the future. And we specifically, each award, look through that and make sure there is no overlap with any other project. And obviously, that's really important. The beauty of computers is that we can really do that effectively. We have access to some NIH grant information. We have excellent communication channels also set up with NIH to just have the conversation. I mean, it's not really an investigator's fault if they've sent out applications to multiple funders, because they don't know who's going to fund them. So that's just part of the process, but then we work it out, and I can promise we do not have duplicate or overlapping funding. We have a really good process to check it out.
Great, makes sense. Okay, I have one more question for all of you, actually. And then we're going to open up for questions from the audience, so I hope you've been thinking about your questions. But for everyone here, how do people living with lupus stay up on what's going on at the federal government, NIAMS, at the Office of Minority Health, at the DOD, and people are very interested in lupus research, and how do they figure out what's going on and stay abreast of all the things, all the exciting things you've been talking about?
So I can start, yeah. So we're all overwhelmed with communication. So let me just start out by acknowledging that. So I would focus on the following resources from the NIH standpoint. So we have a NIAMS newsletter called the NIAMS Update. This kind of tries to summarize all of the latest and greatest scientific advances. It's written at a level that is understandable by the general community, and I would highly recommend that. We also have a web page, not surprisingly, and various portions of our web page, some are focused on just providing education about the different diseases that we are in our mission areas, such as lupus. We encourage patients with lupus to participate in clinical trials, and we direct them to resources where they can find out more about clinical trials that might be accepting patients. We have also, as part of our webpage, we have a community outreach bulletin, and this is really targeting community advocates to help them understand some of the resources for diverse audiences, particularly important for lupus. We also have a Living With series, Living with Lupus, Living with Psoriasis, that I strongly encourage those of you who haven't seen, the Living with Lupus material. I also want to mention, though, that there are over 90 organizations now that comprise the NIAMS Coalition. Several lupus organizations are part of this that really see as their role kind of connecting patients and affected individuals to the NIH and other government agencies. So if you haven't heard about the NIAMS Coalition, I would encourage you to check that out. They have resources for patients, for family members, for researchers, for trainees. So they're a fantastic kind of good place to find basic information about activities related to lupus and other rheumatic and skin diseases. So there's a few for you to put down on your notes to check out, but I'm sure others want to add to that.
That's great, thank you.
So you can always find information on the Office of Minority Health, that's Health and Human Services, Office of Minority Health. There are multiple offices of minority health. But it will point you to the 4 awardees and previous awardees that we actually have funded and their great work that they have done and continue to do. The other piece of that is we collaborated with the Food and Drug Administration and launched a Let's Take Charge campaign a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. And that has videos about people living with lupus, about clinical trials, about a clinical trials like link that you can go and look into all types of clinical trials. There were social media campaigns that were launched behind that. It probably didn't get as much attention as it deserved, but it is there. And it is a start. And I think a lot of information can be shared there, as well as a lot of information can be gained about clinical trials and lupus as a general understanding.
Great, thank you. Okay, same question for you.
Same question.
Yeah, exactly. How do people find out about DOD?
We have a web page, and the address is, it's the initials CDMRP for Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs.health.gov. And there you will see, once an award is made, so right now we're negotiating or putting in place the FY23 awards, so by September 30th, they will all be awarded, and they will all be available. All prior years are also available on the website, and you will see, you can go just read the abstracts there, just a short summary of it. If there are publications, there are links out to the publications from the research that we funded. There are search tabs to search through all the awards if there's something you want to look at. And we also highlight our research on occasion. So multiple times a year, it'll be promoted there on our website. So that's really the best public-facing information that we provide. And then we're constantly reaching out to investigators to have them send in their proposals to us. So that's another outreach. I mean, actually, one thing I would like to just add that I should have told you before that's unique about LRP is that when we do our first review and we have our panel of experts review a research project, they write up a report on this, and it summarizes the strengths and the weaknesses and gives them kind of a score as well. And we actually, we certainly use that internally to help us find the best research. But we do something that I think is really important, is we actually send that out to the investigator. We say, whether they're funded or not funded, and it really, obviously, it benefits everybody, because even if you're funded, you might have some weaknesses. And I think that communication, and if you're not funded, you want to know why, and you want to improve that, and then come back next time, right? So we're educating, hopefully, the investigators or helping them with their projects. So it's a different communication, but I think it's a really unique, important thing that we do. Thanks.
Thanks, yeah. Well, I know NIAMS does that too, having been the recipient of many of those summary statements.
We do too.
But and DODs as well. Great, okay, thank you all very much. And one more shout out to the LFA, because a lot of this information is on the LFA's beautiful web pages as well. Thank you to the LFA staff for maintaining those. There's the Research Accelerated by you, but then there are many other web pages with lots of information about all of these programs on there. Okay, so now you've been thinking hard about your questions. You've got 3 big federal agencies, big department here. You've got the NIH, Health and Human Services, and the Department of Defense, all right here in front of you. So what questions do you have about lupus research, and what do you want to know that will help you? See a hand over there. Yeah, we have a microphone going around, so just let's wait for it so that we can all hear. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Carol. I am from Maryland, and I am a Latina, so I am a minority diagnosed with lupus. My question to the panel is, how much time and funding is invested in studying the correlationship between lupus and emotional and mental health? The reason why I ask this is because there is such a strong relationship, and our mental and emotional health is impacted in many different ways when we have lupus. One of them being that when we have emotional triggers or a mental health diagnosis, that impacts our lupus, right? And also the medications from lupus also impact our mental health, such as the ones such as prednisone, Benlysta. And so there is such a big relationship between these two that I haven't seen a lot of research about that. for example, in my case, I take Benlysta, and I'm supposed to take it every week as an auto injection as part of my treatment, but I have had to cut back to every other week because of the increased anxiety and depression, which will, as a result, increase my chances of a flare-up, right? So everything is so related that I think we don't really investigate much about that relationship. Another thing is that I am also an NIH patient, and I've been part of clinical research studies, not clinical trials, but research studies there. And based on my enrollment, it took me more than 6 months to be enrolled at NIH as a patient, to be seen. And then when I go there for the research studies, it's a day long, I cannot eat, I have to be fasting, a lot of blood work done. And I know that I also have another eye condition, so I can't drive and things like that. So the enrollment process for lupus patients in these clinical trials and clinical research studies is also not accessible. And it's also intimidating, and it's also overwhelming. So I think looking into that aspect so patients can be less intimidated about the whole process, and it can be patient-centered. That would be my question.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that was great. So 2 really important points, one about mental and emotional health and the two-way street of influencing lupus and disease activity. And then another point, and thank you for being involved in clinical research, but how hard it is and what it involves. And so it looks like Lindsay wants to take.
Yeah, I'm happy to address those. Thank you so much for your question and your participation, I guess. With respect to the first one, so increasingly across the NIH, not just at NIAMS, we really are thinking about for complex diseases like lupus and all chronic diseases, we need to be thinking about the whole person. It's not just the cells, the tissues, but it is the whole person health. So that's a concept that increasingly is attracting a lot of attention, which is why it's so important for us to be collaborating and connecting with our colleagues across the NIH. So for example, we've had conversations with the National Institute of Mental Health because there are very important relationships between some of the diseases, some of the autoimmune diseases such as lupus, and mental health, whether it's kind of susceptibility factors or medications or the stress on the body. So increasingly there's the recognition that we really need to think about everything together, as challenging as that is. So I think you should feel hopeful that we recognize that important point. With respect to your second point, I'm really happy to say that just recently, in part recognizing how challenging and intimidating it is for people to come onto the NIH campus and to participate in research. You can't be seen at the NIH unless you're enrolled in a research study. They just opened a new clinic that's in the community. It's called the Hope Center, and I wish I knew the address off the top of my head. Linda might know it. We can get it back to you, but it's meant to break down these barriers. It's in the community. It's not surrounded by a big gate, and it's a clinic. We actually share the clinic space with the Cardiovascular Institute. And so there's some multi-specialty care, but it is a much more accessible place for patients to be seen, particularly those from underrepresented communities that have challenges getting onto the NIH campus, and to receive care and to get consultation services and to enroll in clinical research if they're able to. So, it's staffed by Spanish-speaking clinical research coordinators, so I think you would find it very, very accessible and very welcoming. So happy to get you and others that information if you're interested.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't know about Hope Center. Yeah. It's new. That's great. Thanks. I think there's another question over here, and another hand over there.
Here.
We've got the microphone over there. Okay, behind me. Sorry.
Hello. My name is Judith Mills, and I'm coming from Montclair, New Jersey. I've been a participant of the Department of Defense peer reviewer program, and I love the program, and it's quite rigorous. But I wanted to know if the process of being a peer reviewer going to be more open for patients who just want to volunteer instead of having to be picked, because that's how usually the process is So that was my question for the Department of
Oh,
Defense.
good question. I didn't know about the selection, but I think Dan can answer that.
Yeah, our current process is to, again, all of our reviews, the peer review that she's speaking of, and then our programmatic review, all these panels of experts include people living with lupus because they bring that expertise. The current process to be a person on living with lupus on one of these panels is that you have to be associated, you have to be living with lupus, you have to be associated with an advocacy group that will nominate you and write a letter for you as well, and then you have to submit that to us, and then there's a phone call interview to see, you know, are you okay reviewing research applications? Do you have interest in this? Is this a good match for you? And how can, you know, how can this work out? And then each year, you know, we're on a kind of an annual process. We have our meetings, and then we have our requirements. So we have, as far as the number of, let's say, people living with lupus that would be at peer review, I could estimate it to be about only 10 people a year. So and we let people come back that have done it in the past, but we also try to rotate it through and get representation from different organizations and different people and different perspectives. But I don't know if that really, your question is why is it, like why do they have to be nominated versus just volunteering? It's a good question. I mean, I didn't set up the process that exists. I think they just want people that are, I mean, one of the important roles, as you know, is that you're representing the community. And so I think they're just trying to ensure by having people associated with an advocacy group and nominated by that group, it kind of ensures, you know, we love to hear about an individual's perspective on it, but when you're in that role, you're really speaking for the whole lupus community. So that would be the, I mean, I hope the process wasn't that difficult for you. I mean, it does, yeah. I can relate to that. I'll look into that and see if I can find out more. That's about all I can say about it.
It's a good question. Okay, I saw, okay, right there. Yeah, that's different.
Thank you. My name is Tracy Wilson, and I am a lupus support group facilitator out of Oakland, California. I have two questions, both unrelated to each other. First question is there any research out there about aging and lupus, especially as it relates to menopause or perimenopause? Because when you reach that stage in life, there's a host of things going on. As a lupus warrior, you know, we can't do hormones, all these other different things, right? In addition to the medications that we're taking, Benlysta, and the challenges that the Latina, can't recall her name, brought up in taking Benlysta, and the mental health issues. All of these things tie in, and they are very difficult to maneuver, to say the least. So is there any research going on around aging and lupus as it relates to those things?
Okay, looks like Lindsay wants to take that one. Good question about aging.
A couple of those. First of all, if I heard correctly, you lead a support group in Oakland, California?
Yes.
I may have met you many years ago. When I would enroll participants in our research studies, I would go to support groups all over the state of California. So we might have met many years ago, but thank you for doing that. With respect to lupus and aging, a couple of things I think I can speak to. One is actually some very interesting research, and my group has been involved in this too, suggests that the process of lupus might accelerate the aging process in our cells. So there are measures you can make in cells that give you a measure of biological age. And what we're seeing in lupus is that measure of age is different than a person's age. So there's something about the chronic inflammatory immune process in lupus that's kind of accelerating the aging process. But now with respect to menopause and hormones, et cetera, there's a big challenge. We know that osteoporosis is one of the many major health problems that women have, particularly after the menopause. And it's significantly exacerbated by corticosteroids, prednisone. I heard you all talk about how much you hate prednisone, but sometimes it's a life-saving drug. So, but fortunately, and Karen mentioned this at the outset, the Biden, President Biden and Lady Biden, First Lady Biden, are very interested in women's health issues. And they've recently, President Biden signed an executive order announcing a new initiative in women's health research. And two themes that are coming up over and over again in the language we're seeing related to that is autoimmunity and menopause-related health consequences. So I think from both these standpoints, lupus as an autoimmune disease, women's health related, that's menopause, what's happening with respect to this accelerated aging, I think there'll be more opportunities to try to better understand those interrelated issues moving forward. We're really excited about this Women's Health Research Initiative. And those of you who might want to read more about it, you can search for White House fact sheet on the Women's Health Research Initiative. And there's like 10 or 11 pages that outlines the goals. And autoimmunity and women's health issues such as menopause and osteoporosis are very prominently highlighted there. So that's encouraging to us.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a great session for me too, because I do clinical translational research. So keep your ideas coming, because I think there is a lot of excitement for the Office of Women's Health, Office of Autoimmune Diseases. I've got some notes going, what my future research projects are going to be on. I think we have time for a couple other, over there, yeah, questions.
Hey, my name is Lara Larson. I am a lupus patient. I'm also a bioengineering PhD student at University of Maryland, where I studied lupus. Thank y'all. So one thing that in the autoimmune disease research community in general, not just lupus, that I've heard discussed a lot is the fact that there's not really a home for us to seek out research funding. So there's not like an institute on autoimmunity within the NIH or things like that. And there's been discussion on that, even though there's centers and offices and things. So I guess I was just kind of curious what, Dr. Criswell, your thoughts are on like if there should be an institute, pros and cons, and maybe kind of what those barriers are.
Yes, happy to speak to that. And that was really why, so the reason why there's a new Office of Autoimmune Disease Research is because members of Congress and their staff recognize that autoimmune diseases span all of these different institutes, and there didn't seem to be the optimal amount of coordination. And the concern is about inefficiency or redundancy. So hence the mandate to create this office. And one of the things that they're expected to do is to, and actually this is also happening in terms of the Women's Health Research Initiative, is to provide a central place for people to go to see what are the funding opportunities, whether it's for autoimmune disease research or women's health research, because I can't even navigate. There's so many places to look. There's all the different institutes and the centers and the offices, so that's badly needed. In the same way that those affected with lupus and their family members need kind of some collation of, and consolidation of information for their resources, investigators need this too. So I hope that with these new offices and initiatives, it'll be easier to identify funding opportunities in these areas, and there'll be more efficient and ultimately effective funding in these areas.
Hope so too. Great. Okay, I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions over there before we get the gong and it's lunchtime.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jesus. I'm from Vallejo, California, and I'm a veteran. United States Navy Desert Storm. So I was diagnosed with lupus, Sjogren's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, and APLS. Back on 2005, 2006, UCSF, Dr. Fine. So anyway, my question is for Dr. Dan. Because of that lupus that I had and all the other disease, I cannot access VA. Now my question is, are you doing also research for the people that have my disease that's not actually service-related that I can access VA? And also, you're talking about the active duty that with the PTSD. And right now, I'm not saying experiencing it, but I can relate what it's saying. I'm also under a Benlista every other week. I'm getting anxiety, all those attacks, right? But I'm saying, every time I go to VA, they deny me because it's not service-connected. Now, my question is, on your research, are you guys doing any part of that research as far as for veteran? Because I'm not active. I know when you're active, you get all the whole 9 yards. And like I said, lupus is not cheap. I've been denied the last time. And even though now, I'm still battling, how can I pay for other expenses? That's why my question is that, if there's any research about the PTSD but not service connected, that's going to be part of your research on the Department of Defense.
So I appreciate your question, and I understand the difficulty you're having. Unfortunately, I think that has been seen multiple times, you know, whether it was Agent Orange from Vietnam being denied treatment for that, or other unfortunate ramifications from military service. As far as how are we answering that question, I mean, we don't specifically have a focus area that says, you know, please give us a research project that's related to risk factors related to military service. So that would probably help answer that question. I mean, the reality is, once that link is firmly established, then the VA might change, you know, who they provide service to and include lupus as a healthcare, you know, result of your military service. So until then, I mean, I can tell you we do have research projects that are related to things that could answer some of that information. I mean, we actually funded a study that related to environmental exposure and how it might relate to lupus flares, and found an association with that, and that, you know, there's a lot of exposures with military service. So there is work that's being done, but I can't say that it's directly focused at answering your question, and I apologize because I feel bad because I don't question that there is a link there. It's just, I think it has to get fully proven before they will tie health benefits with it, so I apologize.
Thanks. Okay, I don't know where the microphone is, and I think we have to wrap up. I know there are some people back there. We could probably take a couple questions up here, but I think this has been a fantastic panel. Thank you very, very much, all three of you, for coming. We really appreciate your time. We've learned a lot. I think we have a lot of talking points for tomorrow for going out there to Capitol Hill to advocate. Thank you all. Thanks. Good enough?
Yes, and just another quick round of applause for the panel, for Dr. Kostenbader for doing a great job moderating, Dr. Criswell, Tish, and Dan. They do great work, and again, as Dr. Kostenbader said, a lot of things that we can share with members of Congress tomorrow. Now ends the live stream portion of the summit, so for those watching online, the program's going to conclude, but please keep an eye on your inbox tomorrow. We will have an advocacy alert coming out so that while everyone in this room is on Capitol Hill tomorrow, everyone back home online can reach out to their members of Congress and make sure that our voices are heard, not just here, but around the country. So keep an eye out for that email in the morning. We are going to go to lunch now. So with lunch, it's out in the foyer here, in the buffet. Grab your lunch, bring it back. And we'll begin our next session at 1:30. And also, if you had a question that wasn't answered, feel free to go to the LFA booths out in the foyer. Certainly you can ask me or Sarah or Amina, one of the advocacy staff. We're happy to help. So thank you again to our panel, and we'll see you in a bit.